All right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to the Xander Clements podcast. It's been so long. I actually missed Kyle since the last time we've done this. No, I for a little while when we were doing the happy hour stuff, this thing felt like a bit of a grind week to week. So it's kind of nice doing it once a month or so. We've kind of missed it a little bit. So try to get back on track with this episode. I've done a lot since. Kyle's been up to a lot since. So have I. So is Kart Chaser. Kyle, what's our count? You were just doing the schedule for the
We're
social
at
team. What's our race count right now?
right now.
We're up in the 60s now, aren't we?
In
For
total
this
for
year?
the year, we're gonna have 63. Is that full count? Right now, going into this weekend will be broadcast number 15. So
Yeah.
not 15 weekends, but now we have 15 broadcasts because we overlap so much now.
Yeah. Yeah. So and that's again that still has more that might get added onto it. Um, so we've been busy, man. We've been adding a lot. We've have a couple new partners that have come on, which is really cool. A huge thank you to Simcraft, to Coastal Ink Custom Printing, our two latest associate partners that are like kind of full time on everything that we're doing, which is really cool. And it's been, busy week to week logistics, uh, meetings with series. Just had another meeting with Stars today to get ready for their season opener in Charlotte. Been on the phone and planning out the USPKS opener next week. We have a slower week this week. We just have the Whiteland Raceway Park Indy Karting Challenge Club Series um, to get their second round on Saturday, and that's it. Hope everybody has a good Easter on Sunday. But yeah, a lot to catch up on now that we're kind of 3 months into the year. So, Kyle, what do we have first on our topic list to talk about? Because there's a lot of ground to cover.
Well, since the last podcast, we've had a couple of big events. We had the Ryan Norberg. I believe the last one we did was the week of the Ryan Norberg Invitational, and obviously the weekend after that we had. Actually, no, it might have been before NOLA. So between then and now, you've become a go-kart driver again. We've had two pro show formats, two different chaotic races. And first up on the docket tonight is let's talk about Norberg man. We'll talk about you being a go-kart driver later. We got a lot of questions in the Q&A about that. So, yeah, the first up, let's
Yeah,
talk about
I
that.
went through and I cycled those. Sometimes I cycle out the stupid ones that we get because everyone gets a lot more gutsy when Instagram lets you privately message them in. But we're gonna hit them all tonight. So Facebook actually had a lot of good discussions on the Q&A. I'm excited to get to a lot of those. There's a lot of new ideas. I think that sport's in a good spot. I think first, yeah, you're right. The last time I think we did this was probably early February. Might have been even been before the second SKUSA Winter Series event. I think it was end of January. I think we missed our end of February, kind of early March episode in the madness. So, first couple thoughts on the starts of the year. Um, but last year we were at the Rotax Max Winter Trophy, held by Grid 14, and from a year to this year, a lot more American teams went, a lot more American drivers went. And it basically went from kind of being off the beaten path, and a couple of people went and didn't maybe do the national races at first, or the first part of the year, like the SKUSA race, Winter Series race, or maybe they didn't do the Florida Winter Tour Rock round, but they did the Rotax round, or vice versa. They did those two races. They didn't do Rotax. And then this year, it felt like a lot of people did that. I know the majority of the teams did it. Everyone just kind of had a busy Florida stretch. And it was probably the worst time to throw something really new at everybody at the end of between the NorbergNats with the Ryan Norberg Invitational and the Winter Nationals, that were two kind of events that, on paper, everything that they were doing is super exciting, super forward thinking. In terms of trying something different, it came at probably one of the worst times, which was, I feel like, the most burnout. And talking with myself and a few team owners, even racers and families, I'm sure, the most burnout this early in the year that the sport I think's endured, stateside, where there was something pretty much every single weekend from if you went and tested before the SKUSA Winter Series on the first weekend of the year, if not at least the second weekend of January, and it felt like the stretch went all the way through and kind of capped off at the Pro Tour race in Orlando. So if you did all of those, which not only a handful of customers or drivers did, but every team did one. Every one of the supported drivers was working at a different way. So it was a great thing, I'm sure, for tuners and coaches and data analysts and mechanics. It was really rough overall for I think a lot of people. And talking with them all, it was like, man, I'm a little bit worried that we're all so burnt out and it's mid March. So um, that I think hinders a little bit going in. And then, the Norberg Invitational obviously had a super bittersweet ending with the way that Dalton and Harley end up getting DQ'd off of being underweight. But regardless of that, I think there's a lot of takeaways from that event that's worth talking about. And the first and the foremost thing is, trying to find that good balance for our sport if we're going to do showcase races that, yes, we do have, you know, drama and hard racing will eventually bleed over into wrecks and controversy and stuff that people want to watch. But in my mind, we're a sport that's kind of fighting for legitimacy. uh, Fighting against the grain. We're the little kid trying to get a seat at the big kid table, and F1 can look like a circus, and NASCAR can look like a circus, and uh, IndyCar can, and sports cars can from time to time because they're already respected disciplines of racing. And being that our voice is the quietest because we're the smallest globally in terms of exposure, you know, obviously the bad stuff is going to go a lot more viral than the good stuff. But if it's all bad, or if we only have bad stuff to work with to push out, then it doesn't end up looking good. And so in the Norberg race, obviously the unfortunate part was the ending, but I think also equally unfortunate was the racecraft. And we're going to get into that a lot deeper into the show. I have some clips that pulled up, and it was pretty good for me, I think, to get out and go and race the first two Texas Sprint Racing Series races because we watched that series, and I've seen a lot of like head scratching wrecks and moments, and I think now I've got a lot better understanding of why some of this stuff is happening. Um, and I think we're dancing too close to the limit. So, you know, back in the day where you had, if anything, maybe a smaller contingent of drivers that race go karts, but you know, in terms of like the crowds that kind of followed each other around, I think the sport was a lot more segregated or fragmented and divided. In that you race the same 10 to 20, even 30 guys like 8 to 15 times a year, and now it's a much quicker turnover. Um, you know, and I mean top to bottom, club to regional to national. The guys are move up the chain quicker, or they move out quicker. Um, and So the old adage of respect, I think, comes after the initial period when you're kind of elbowing each other, right? Like you have the five stages of a relationship, friendship, whatever. You have the newness stage that's kind of awkward. Then you have the conflict stage. Then you have resolution. Then you come out like a lot stronger, right? And so, we see this all the time with our team. We bring new people in all the time, and at first everybody's buddies, and sometimes you have little issues, and then eventually you come out usually on the other side really, really good. Well, if you have such a quickly turning over crowd, you don't have time to do that. So you don't have time to build like kind of this drivers council. And I've been saying that some of these other podcast episodes we've done that I've been hopeful that at least at like the national level with how many races some of these guys are running against each other that can develop. Now 206 is a different animal because just the nature of those national races, there are still guys in their 20s, in their 30s, running up at the front. Um, Sean Meyer, Colin Warren, he's my age. He's been running those races now for 10 years ongoing in senior. So Brandon Jarskrak obviously going over there. That's a lot more of veterans. but there's still a lot of young kids that are coming to join them. So it's tough to have, let's say, all of the old guys. If you have 10 old guys and one new guy come in, it's easy to write him. It's a lot harder when you have the old guys get outnumbered. Um, and, I don't want to sound like the old guy where it's like racing what used to be, X and now it's this because stuff changes and it evolves. There's probably a part of me where people will say that based on what I'll say later. Um, but anyway, little sidetrack. Back to the Norberg thing. We didn't have that. I think it was also a mix of too good at drivers, too many good drivers. I mean, it was a stacked field when we got to the Saturday night event, um, on a package that was slow enough to keep them all together, and on a racetrack that, even with the slower package, has really long braking zones into really tight corners. So you're just asking for dive bombs 4 car lengths back, or stack ups when guys go to the bottom and defend, and just get rooted out of the way. I mean, in talking with some people when we got to the Pro Tour the next week, there was, I mean, clean drivers, good drivers, veteran drivers were driving dirty in that race. So, the idea was to, I mean, we got the opposite end of what IndyCar was trying to get when you were at Thermal last weekend, right? IndyCar did
Yeah.
that way break trying to group the field up so you don't get a runaway, still got a runaway. We grouped the field up and we killed each other up until the final segment, and still were killing each other further back from the money. But I think people had started to give up hope that they were going to get to the top 3 by the third stage if you didn't start near the front. So I think the third stage, that's why it was cleanest. But the first 2, you're fighting to get to the field. The field's close on time. And, you know, you can only do so much as penalties for the race directors when there's only a couple and there's no video system and there's not a lot of time to hyper analyze everything. My roommate Austin, he used to race F4 and F3, and what's nice about car racing is you can armchair quarterback a race for 4 hours until they go out next time, so they can look at everyone's data and they can look at everyone's video and really go through incidents. So you couldn't do that. You had them all grouped together. You had them on a K100 package, which has enough draft and is slow enough that they can all get to the limit. And so what are you going to get? You're going to get guys all over each other because there was no further event. There was no consequences. They called penalties, right? Like they got DeMello for moving Garrison out of the way and took away his win. But looking back, and I know Ryan agrees that we weren't ready because you can't just rely on respect because some of those guys aren't going to race each other next week. So if you can't rely on respect, then you have to tighten the sandbox on race directing and maybe, change a little bit of the format. So then we go to the Pro Tour the next week, right? And the format goes the opposite direction, longer sessions, and still we're having some incidences. But I think the excitement around the event was good. I think the scheduling was good. It's just, if we're going to have a slower package, we probably needed less go-karts on the racetrack to start that main. Probably needed to cap it at 20 versus start 34. And I think that'd be a little more manageable on catching every incident. And you're not as worried about the whole field behind you piling into a corner like what we saw in the first 2 stages. Because, again, the third stage, that's the other thing I'm forgetting too. Third stage, we were down to 20 go-karts, and it was like noticeably cleaner with still
The
some.
cleanest stage.
Yeah, it was still some incidences, but the same thing we've been preaching forever, right? That like you put less go-karts on the racetrack, you can manage it better, and the racing naturally cleans up. But we started 35 guys with no points on the line, 10 laps to get to the front. What can you expect, right? So, but it was a good lesson, I think. And I think what we were able to do with the interviews was good. It was a bummer that the product turned out the way that it did, that it made us look more circusy than racy. We want these last lap battles that the sport naturally gives us every week, but you don't want us crashing because then everyone just turns it off. And we're giving ammo to people that are looking to put the sport down and fueling their argument that they already believe and want to believe that it's just too dirty, it's too dangerous, it's stupid, and it kind of looked that way, in the first few stages.
So what's the resolution? So obviously you talked about faster engine package. Like we're thinking if it was X30, maybe it'd be a little bit better. Maybe, and then like, you know, what do you think of the Australian Pursuit? Like, because obviously we're talking about more go karts in the track makes it worse. Do you think if we just didn't do that and we started the 3 segments with 20, 24 go karts around there, it would have been better all the way through? Or do you think?
I think you still could have done the Australian Pursuit because I think that's a really cool concept of cutting the back half of the field off and forcing the back of the field to race and not just save tires, right? I mean, imagine if that existed in the IndyCar race, last weekend. If the back
Oh,
two
it
were going to
needed
get
it.
cut, right? Like in that first stage, if 11th and 12th are cut, guys might be like backing up to still save tires like they were, but then they'd be fighting last second
Yeah,
like,
but then
oh
you'd actually
crap,
have
this
a
guy did.
battle.
Yeah. So I think the Australian Pursuit concept is really good. You look at the Miami Grands though, and the shootout races, right? Those are capped at, we've upped them to at the most 16. And I think if you're going to do a one-off race in a short distance, 20 is probably the max number to start it. And so if I'm, again, armchair quarterback in hindsight 2020 on the Norberg race, I'm starting 20 and I'd cut 4 at every stage and I'd get down to 12 by the end. You'd run the risk that you don't want to go too small because I've always been of the belief that you need 2 to 3 times the amount of guys that you want in the lead pack at the end of the race starting. So you need, because let's say we have 15 stellar guys that can win the race. 5 of them are going to either drive a little bit bad or make a mistake or something and lose the pack. And another 5 might miss a little bit on setup or engine. So you're going to get down to 5 guys if you start with 15 studs that are racing for the win at the end. But if you start with only 5, your chances are lower. And that's why, like, the shifter races up until this year, and really, they were pretty good last year, to be honest, at the Pro Tour. But like a star shifter race last year, would start with 4, maybe 5 guys really capable of winning. And then naturally, 1 or 2 wouldn't hit the setup right or wouldn't hit the engine right. And 1 or 2 maybe wouldn't be driving the best. And by the end, you'd end up with a runaway most of the time. And that was the same way with the pro shifter field at SKUSA the year before and the year before that. And when it was smaller and we had the big 3, right? We had AJ, Danny, Marin. We knew it was going to be, if they knew they were racing the 2 of each other and maybe someone else would get in. And then last year, midway through the year, GFC gets the new Miami engine. Boom, Kyle Wick, Jacob Gulick right in the mix. And Musgrave was, even though he was up there with the Miami, he got back up there with the KZ by the time SuperNats rolled around. And, SRP brought over Trefilov and brought over Troger, and they were good. And Ramo, was in the mix, and obviously podiumed at SuperNats. So you just need more good guys. So, yeah, if I were to do the Norberg Invitational again, you'd invite your 10, you take 10 out of the semi-pro race, which would have worked. He let in the 23 that ended up running the semi-pro race. So that would have still made the semi-pro night important because you would have had to get in the top 10 to transfer. And then you would have had 20 guys and then cut 4 and cut 4. And I think you still would have had good battles near the back. You might have had maybe only 1 guy on the outside looking in that bubble spot, knowing you'd have a little attrition and 1 guy break or 1 guy get spun. So he's way back in 20th or 19th, but you probably still would have 1 to 2 fighting around that 16th spot. But all you need to do is get in the top 20. You're pretty safe. And you just had too many guys feeling safe. And so they were being over aggressive in the first 2 stages, I think. But you could do it. Yeah, a faster engine would spread the field out, but I think also if you cut the field size down, you'd probably alleviate a lot of the issues, and you'd make it a lot easier on the racetrack. So you have less go-karts to watch and try and penalize on. And they were trying to, Justin and Ryan, trying to give the driver some leeway to make a show out of it. But it was a little too far, and it got out of hand kind of quickly. And Justin's doing what he can, but also I think he probably could have been stricter Friday night, especially knowing that a penalty Friday night wasn't going to matter in terms of the transfer to Saturday. but some of the incidents Friday night and little stuff might have set a better tone going into Saturday too. And I'm not saying Justin's a bad race director. I think he's a good one. I think we've got a lot of honestly good officials here. We just need to tighten our sandbox up a little bit.
So it's interesting when you brought up thermal. It made me think. One of the big stories when we walked away from that event was, is this the new normal for IndyCar? Was this event good enough that, we'll see more of these throughout the season? And we go back to karting. Today we got an announcement that the Badger Kart Club is going to host an event the weekend before the USPKS round to host a money event what would be what we'd normally call the practice weekend, the weekend before. Do you think the Norberg event and at least the concept of it worked efficiently enough that we could see this as a new norm, maybe 3 to 4 times a year, as a this is just a regular thing on a practice weekend a couple times a year?
I mean, going into it, a lot of guys are like, hey, before the event even got underway, everyone was excited. Actually, that Badger event, that one I caught wind of, and I think they might have announced a little before today. I know they're starting to push it more. But they had reached out saying, and taken that idea to do it as well. I think the idea of doing shootout races on what's now become the norm of having a test weekend the weekend before a national race is a cool concept. It'd be better engine wise if they were done the week after, so you could use there you go, mid-February. Kyle, stay up to date.
Sorry.
Yeah. It'd be better if they were the week after, so you could just use up what's left of your engine to go and run it versus have to debate whether or not to run your fresh motor before the big race that you're actually coming into town for. But the concept's cool, and hey, if it draws people out and that's another boost to help the tracks, feel happy that they're bringing a big race to town the following week and generate some hype, and it's something that they can do to spice up the test weekend and make it fun. That was cool. The other feedback was, because Orlando was still running rentals in the afternoon, the days were like ridiculously long for the teams that would be there at 6 a.m. to start practice at 8, run practice till 2, sit around in the Orlando heat and work on go-karts from 3 to 7, and then go and race 7 to 10, and then go fix stuff after 10 o'clock and then come back the next day. So it made the days really long to try and do it under the lights there. But there's definitely interest. I think everybody wants to race, do more races and stuff, and that's all cool. I mean, we're seeing that across the board. There's no shortage of getting at least 30 KAs. It feels like anywhere you go in the country right now, you can pull a decent 100cc field if you throw either a little money or have a good regional series going. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, so let's talk about the Pro Tour. Let's talk about the first Pro Show. So I came out of that weekend feeling pretty good on my end, personally. I feel like as far as the show, that the broadcast that we put on, people, I think I'm proud that, we had a lot of people in new places, like for the first time. And I feel like until I just told you that, you probably wouldn't have noticed. And so I was really proud of our guys. And I think, based on that, going to the second round, I think it'll be even better. And, the format is really what I want to talk about. I heard a lot of different things. There were more different opinions on the format. There's probably very few people who have the same opinion. So the only thing that I heard was that we needed more racing, more races before Saturday, more track time. What did you think, Xander, of the format itself, and what did you hear that you might want to expand on?
Yeah, I mean, I have to put it in perspective, right? Because I took a lot of feedback through that weekend, and that weekend was a moving target. There was inevitable hiccups, and I don't think I braced myself mentally enough for all of that. And getting this involved with them, working. I mean, really, we're pretty in deep now, working hand in hand with a lot of the series we work with. So it's hard not to take the harsher criticisms to heart. And racers, we always believe that we're better than everybody else because you have to be to go out on the racetrack and win. When we're off the racetrack, that a lot of that mindset applies. So it's hard not to get frustrated. But that format it morphed into, in my opinion, one of the worst hybrids of it, because the whole initial plan was everything is in the afternoon to try and split bodies through the day. All of the drivers and their mechanics in the afternoon sessions can go and help in the morning, and vice versa. And as more feedback came in with different teams, the practice for that got scrapped. Now, the two gripes that people had with the practice was number one is, at the end of the day, calling it pro, call it whatever you want. There are only X amount of drivers that are able to go out there and not focus on anyone else and get up to speed. What those guys are usually doing is getting the newer drivers that are running the headline pro class and coaching those guys. So you've got basically a pro-am class. Ryan does it for the RPG X30s. Kyle Wick and Jacob Gulick are doing it for the GFC shifters. Mateus Morgado's doing it for the PSL shifters. Formal's doing it, and Kremers for, the Raleigh shifters, and so on and so forth down the line. So when you went with 2 30-minute practices each day, well, yeah, that is more laps on the racetrack. Even when you factor in pit stops, it's less time that those guys have in between or after the sessions to do a coaching session. Whereas where we ended up with the normal practice day, 5 sessions Thursday or 5 sessions Friday, they had time after every single session to go and coach. And also, and this was kind of also a product of doing that, a lot more guys put on tires than normal through Thursday and Friday, because the Saturday format and the Sunday format had you only at the worst on a session and a half used tires if you went qualifying, super pole, and then the pre-final, and you were back on new on Sunday. So everyone was doing new tires all the time. That didn't work. So we didn't save money on the tires, didn't save money on the mechanics. We ended up, for us at least, still good on Sunday and on Saturday. Viewership wise, even behind the paywall Saturday, the highest viewed session of the entire day, beating every other regular class main event, was Super Pole qualifying for shifter, and then right behind it was qualifying for X30, and then it was the X30 pre-final, and then the shifter pre-final. So I think the quali format of doing Super Pole the way that we did it, with 2 evenly matched groups and 6 transferring, I think that was a win. I had a feeling that was going to be a win no matter what. The pre-final and the final going longer. The pre-final actually had a lot of positivity coming out of it. I think it was really clean. I think people liked the longer laps. I think it pushed guys, to really physically be there. And the main event, same thing. I don't think we get that shifter finish if we finish a lap earlier. So the longer races were great. They I think for the most part cleaned things up a lot. That was good. Going back, and what I would recommend, and hopefully SKUSA can get an announcement out really, really soon for Cincinnati, because we're now about 2 months away, or 2.5 months away, is to probably, if you're going to do it again, move qualifying to Friday afternoon, because Friday doesn't run long. Friday will never, almost never, run behind schedule if it's just practice sessions. So you could run late Friday. Saturday and Sunday, naturally with race red flags, ran behind. So you could then put in another heat on Saturday and do a 2 long heats Saturday, and then go to your main. And then the other thing that was the unexpected consequence, even with the Masters classes in the mix, since they qualified in the same 10-minute block and they practiced together, the practice to warm up to pre-final, or warm up to quality to pre-final for the junior drivers on an X30 and K was too tight. And like RPG, for example, a team of 30 drivers, they come with a couple floaters. And talking with Mike, he said they had to use all of their floaters to get their junior drivers back and forth to the grid and adjust on the go-karts and change the tires Saturday and Sunday. So where we need to look is, it's okay if we're not going to be able, because the cost-cutting procedures, whether it's sharing bodies or whatever, is meant to help the teams be able to justify sponsoring more drivers, or at least the driver that they want to run to get in this class, and we don't end up with our best drivers in the sport driver coaching on the sidelines. If the splitting bodies doesn't work, if that's not going to work on practice with the coaching, then throw that out the window and let's at least try to find a way if we can limit the tire sessions that they run through practice and limit through the warm-ups and make the warm-ups a true warm-up and not another tire burn practice session on Saturday or Sunday, which Saturday turned into before qualifying. So, and then running that second heat race would also help them through the practice format want to run on old tires, so they know how the go-kart runs on old tires. So that was the big learning thing I think for me was it hurt the junior double duty guys in the mornings. And the other argument as well was, if we're going to split guys up, like that's okay, except for the fact they're still going to put 2 hours into a go-kart prepping after the sessions are done. So if we go straight into the pro show in the afternoon, you're still making one mechanic's day like super long, because he's going to have 2 hours to work on the pro kart and then 2 hours to go back to the junior kart that he was working on in the morning. So we'll see what the reception looks like. Even Stars, we were talking, and it sounds like it's mostly positive, but those are the two takeaways, and it's all practice related. None of it matters really when we get to Saturday and Sunday, which is why the racing stuff stuck with the original format. But it's are the customer drivers that enter these classes and are relying on a pro or driver coach in the pits to get up to speed by losing a couple of practice sessions to get coached, even if the sessions are longer, do they quit because they're further off the pace, or are they even further off the pace by the end of the day Sunday? I don't know. We didn't even get to see what that delta would look like. Is a guy that's a second to 2 seconds off when he starts the first session Friday, is he still going to be a second off by Sunday like some of the guys were, or would he have been a second and a half off with the original format of 2 long practice sessions with a hot pit? We don't know that. We'll get a better read on it with those same drivers when we go to Stars, and we'll see how far they are off of the AJ Myers and Talon Yockels and Colin Daly's compared to where they were a year ago. Because Stars is going to run 3 practice sessions on Friday and then boom, qualifying. And then the second thing that they'll learn as well is, are the mechanics going to be able to double up? Is it going to be the headache that it was anticipated to be of mechanics having to work on 2 go-karts till 10 o'clock at night because you're still having to do 2 hours of post-race day tear down and clean up. And so, but yeah, armchair quarterback and back. If you're throwing away the double up mechanics at the SKUSA stuff, then you could merge Saturday back in a little bit. You could do some stuff with Sunday. Maybe take the warm-ups instead of after the lunch break. You do the warm-ups in the morning. Still have them run their mains in the afternoon. Or even Alex Speed gave me the idea. He's like, what if you put the pro mains before the semi-pro mains? IndyCar does that, right? We run USF 2000 or USF Pro 2000 races sometimes after the IndyCar race in the afternoon, and IndyCar starts at noon. So maybe that's another change that you could do to help the junior drivers in the split, is run the pro classes middle of the day and put their warm-up after all the other class warm-ups before qualifying. Yeah. If you're not worried and you're throwing the idea of doubling bodies up back and forth.
I think that actually helps. That actually might be a decent idea, because one of the things from my perspective in socials was like the headache of, all right, we spent the entire week promoting that this is going to be at, I forget the exact time it was, but it was like 3 p.m. Eastern, and then it's like middle of the semi-pro stuff.
3:45 was.
It was like middle of the semi-pro stuff. Like I was having to look at the schedule and like do math on like, okay, how far are we behind, and to like try and post and make another post of like updated schedule. It's like we have the times are subject to change, but it's like if we want to try and build the sport and get new eyeballs onto onto this idea that we have of the pro show, like if we're going to promote all week that it's 3 Eastern, like we need to, the less variables we can have of getting a delay by moving like maybe 3 or 4 classes to after it. That's 3 or 4 classes where, a delay in the schedule doesn't bump us.
Yeah, you run the risk. Yeah, you run the risk of less delays. Every single race session runs the risk of a red flag and delaying it and putting the day behind. And, Orlando naturally again, just in the same thing with talking about the Norberg race. That track lends itself to really, late dive bombs and moves, and I think we have more red flags there than let's say we do at some other places. So Stars has a lunch break, an hour break before the OKN stuff gets underway with their timetable. All of their mains will be done by noon for the semi-pro classes, and then the pro show will start at 1 and run till 3. So with that hour gap, even if they run a little behind, they're going to have time. They've got that luxury because every class runs a warm-up, quali, 2 heats, I think a pre-final, and then the final. Yeah. Um, and they were able to put all of that into the afternoon for the pro guys minus their pre-final, so they only lose 1 session, whereas SKUSA they lost 2. And Stars is going as long with the sessions. They do lose 1 practice, but everybody also still loses. They lose 2 practices in theory, going from 5 to 3, but everybody else lost 1. So it's really their 4 practices for the semi-pros down to 3 for the pros. And instead of everybody else gets 2 heats and a pre-final, the pros get 2 heats and then just the final, which they have to do anyway because the KA classes, at least for sure, KA senior is going to go over max capacity and have to run a B pre-final. That's basically an LCQ. So the last point about the track time, this was what was ringing through my head all weekend as everybody was complaining, because just as much as some of the pro guys were upset that they weren't getting as many sessions, at least race sessions, which I agree, they probably should race at least one more time, because it doesn't matter how long you make the pre-final or final, you blow a motor on lap 4, you only ran 4 laps. Race could have been 8 laps, 10 laps, 18. I broke a bumper bolt on Sunday in the 3rd heat race. It was a 6 minutes plus 2 laps. We ran 9 laps total. I broke it on the first lap. They meet me on lap 5. But it didn't matter to me if that was 5 laps, 15 laps, 20 laps. I only got 5 laps. So I get that. But if you're racing a pro category of any kind of racing, the argument of dividing your entry fee by the number of laps you get should go out the window, because you are transitioning from being a customer and an amateur driver that pays to race and is getting the product from the series, and instead you're asking to get paid by the series to race, which SKUSA stepped up and did, Stars is doing in contingencies, and USPKS is doing. If you're asking to get paid and be paid to be an entertainer, you are now a part of the product, and you, to me, should surrender the right to complain about what you're being a part of. If you don't like that you're not driving as much, go and run the amateur classes. Go be a customer again. You're not a pro. If you want to get paid to do, if you want to get paid to dance on the stage like a monkey, dance the way they want to tell you how to dance. And that to me is cut and dry. So I hear them on, okay, let's race more and practice less. Let's qualify Friday. Let's cut some practices out. Let's do some heat races, because you do learn a lot more in the heat races than you learn in a practice session. All for that. But you're trading off some of your laps over the course of the weekend to get more exposure, to get the purse money you want, all of that. So stop saying that you need to get the same amount of laps as a micro or a mini or whatever, or a KA senior. Because if you want to get paid, if you want to be and call yourself a pro, your relationship to the event is different. And you can't expect it to be the same. You don't get to have your cake and eat it too. You don't get to get paid where the mini kids don't get paid and the KA senior guys don't get paid and still get the same amount of laps as them. It's not fair.
Yeah, well, I'm just gonna say this. If you see me in the paddock, come tell me like why I'm wrong. But are we gonna pretend that like we're not at the track the weekend before and the week of practicing all day long, like, and then
Yeah, well, I
complaining
don't
about?
think
So like,
they
tell me
were
why
too
I'm wrong.
upset about like not enough practice. I think they got more than their fill of practice on the practice weekend, or not the the practice days. Their issue was just not enough races.
Okay, if we're complaining
So
about not enough racing, fine. If we're
That's
complaining
fine.
about lack of track time, like no.
Yeah.
No, I was there on Wednesday and Tuesday. I was there like the whole week. I saw everybody on track all week.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
no.
No, I think everyone agrees there's too much testing time. Um, and some of the teams testing the weekend before were anticipating the two 30-minute practices each day, Thursday, Friday, which is why they went and tested the weekend before. Um, yeah, there's definitely, but yeah, by the time we got to Saturday and hearing some of the kids go, oh well, okay, they're getting to drive all day. Well, yeah, you know what? They're getting $0 in their championship purse. You guys have $25,000 in cash in your championship purse that goes down to the top 10, plus a season entry and tires for the following year. And all you got to do to finish 10th in the championship like that is pretty much average around a 12th to 13th, just off of attrition. And you're going to basically get a funded ride for 2025. So nobody else is getting that. Your trade-off is you have to watch a little bit. That's part of it. So, and it still was more driving time during a day than than a car race. Also, you know, if you qualify on Friday, you could limit the tires, through the Saturday warm-up. You could force everyone to use the race tires or the quali tires, or you could say, all right, you got one set to use at any point throughout practice, and that's also your practice and your warm-up set, or however you limit the practice tires starting Friday. It's tough for the series to limit them because of the way that they use their people. It'd be an extra investment of the series for the racers to do this. Like, no team had an issue saying that we want a tire limit on Friday. Of course, it's not their money being spent. That's asking the series now to bring more people, because the way that tire pickup works at these bigger events that provide the tires is the people that hand out the tires on Friday practice day are the same people that scan your tires on Saturday and Sunday. So if you're going to have them scanning tires on Friday, they need to hire more people to hand out the tires on the Friday. So whether or not that happens is tougher. It would have been an easier limit with the hot pit sessions, because you could have just said, all right, maximum of 2 tire sets you bring to the grid. And at the worst, someone's putting on 4 new sets on Friday. At the worst. And I think you'd be kind of dumb to do that, because your first session, you might as well go out on scuffs. And especially if you're racing on scuffs, you're not going to go new every single time. But if you start the process on Friday with qualifying, you can limit the Saturday warm-up. That frustrated me. The Saturday warm-up was frustrating because it was just another new tire run. And I think that weekend tire bill probably was more than normal. And the warm-ups, the reason they got added on Sunday was if guys were putting a new piston in a KZ overnight, they wanted to go break it in on the racetrack, or just make sure that their cart didn't fall apart on the outlap of Maine. That's all cool. That's a warm-up. It should not be a new tire practice run. So if you want to do that, you should have to go out on scuffs or some crappy tire, because you shouldn't be doing setup practice. You should be putting around, go fast, make sure the engine sounds good, make sure nothing breaks, and then pull in. That's what it's a warm up, right? Warm you up, warm the go-kart up, get off the racetrack. Yeah. Yeah.
So I've got one more thing, and then after this, we're gonna segue into the discussion on racecraft. But like last thing, not really format related. Thinking about the event, like we had a lot of attrition, especially in X30, a little bit less in shifter actually. I just thinking about that with the longer races. I just wanted to ask you, like, is there a reason for that? Is there something going into the next round that, like, is that like a story going into the next round? Is, engines seizing in X30? Like, are people going to have to adjust for that? Like, what was the deal with that?
Yeah, that
Because
was
we actually,
weird.
like, we've never seen anything like that. And I, like, being a sports car fan, like, racing fan that, like, watches the 90s and the 80s, like, attrition is what makes the races great, right? Like, I thought it added a, because you don't know, oh, is this guy going to have a problem? Oh, he's on, they both share engine builder. Maybe that's like, it adds another layer to the story, I think, in watching a race. But, what was the deal with that? Because that's rare.
You're talking the X30 engines grenading, like
Yeah.
with Keeble
Yeah.
and
Like, going in, like, you would have thought more it would have been an issue in the shifter race, right? Like,
yeah.
and it
Yeah.
wasn't.
I think that was Yeah, because I mean, some guys had brakes lock up. Uh, yeah, Keeble had the engine let go. I can't remember what Gulick's issue was. I think it makes it more of a you know mechanic tuner team championship by having those longer races and making the carts last. I mean, RoboPong is just about making the cart go 200 laps around Newcastle. Back in the day with the enduro, it was making sure you didn't have something break on it. So yeah, hopefully some adjustments are made. I think that was an unintended consequence. I don't think guys are building the motors to seize, but in X30, but maybe, so uh but yeah, I think from a spectacle standpoint, I think that is cool to see. All right, is this guy going to last the whole way? But you're right. I mean, the KZ guys, nobody really had any engines grenade from what I remember in shifter, but we had it in X30. So it was definitely a good test of man and machine. I think a lot more. It was a lot better test on driver physicality, on drivers saving tires. Um, I think that was good all around, uh, and it definitely cleaned up the opening. Should have cleaned up the opening few laps more than it did. So, but we'll get to that here. Actually, before we get to the racecraft, what else do we have? Let's move that a little bit later because I
Okay.
want to wait on that. What was the other one? We have the USPKS discussion. Yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
let's do that one next. Um, and then we'll get because racecraft might take us a little while. So for anyone that's watching this podcast back, there's a reason why this is hours long. The racecraft stuff's going to take a little while. And so with the Q&A.
Well, it's okay. I'm gonna get this up on the podcasting platforms, and somebody, hopefully people have something to listen to on their drive to Houston next week.
Yeah.
So speaking of Houston, going to Houston next week, USPKS. There's been a big discussion this week in the community around the entry for the shifter class, and also X30 is a little bit down, but mainly the shifter class doesn't look good. So what?
Mhm.
Let's start from the beginning of shifter and USPKS and just kind of run it from there, Xander.
Yeah. So USPKS becomes kind of king of the hill in 2021. Was already kind of on track for that in 2020, and then even really solidified it, I think, in 2022. One of the only series to touch 300 entries over the handful of classes. Um, I don't want to put down the 206 guys. CKNA, obviously massive, huge kudos to 500 entries at Charlotte, 500 at CKNA Grands, and there's probably going to be 300 to 400 at Pittsburgh at least, maybe pushing 500 if the Canadians come down and add it on. But to hit 300 over just 7 classes, and you can only run double duty in um, uh, 2 juniors and 2 seniors. So if you count the number of drivers, it's less at the 206 stuff because everybody only runs 2. Um, you don't see as much of that here. So USPKS becomes kind of the lead there. Hadn't ever had shifter in the, I guess it'd been 9 or 10 years from 2013 to 2022. And people were pushing them to do it. I think the KZ hype and excitement was building. Stars is pulling good numbers, more grassroots types people at the time. Pro Tour is seeing a shifter resurgence with the KZ stuff. Um, so you're like, all right, if you want this class to grow, you got to offer it everywhere. I mean, that's part of the reason why KA is so much bigger than VLR, and part of the reason why 206 will never get eclipsed by Tillotson is if you change jobs, if for some reason you got to move across the country, there's a damn good chance there's a 206 class that got 20 go-karts at that other club track. So if you want the class to be big, it's got to be able to be run everywhere. So they had it last year, and it's okay. It has just enough, just under the pay limit at Orlando, but they pay them anyway. With the minimum of 20, I think they had 18, and then the rest of the year would drop down to 15 or 13, and up or down, and then we get to GoPro at the end of the season. It's like 9 or 10, and it's expensive to run. Now, uh, X30 is too, and so is KA really. Um, but you just don't have as much interest to go run it. I mean, if there was always an interest to go faster and spend more money and learn something new and go race a different go-kart, then the shifter class would be full because the KA classes are, bursting at the seams. Even the X30 stuff's kind of plateaued. Looking at the numbers for USPKS this weekend, the X30 stuff isn't huge. There's superstars that are running KA exclusively, you know. Um, and why would they? I mean, I just came off running K at that weekend. At TSRS, that was a solid field. I had a good time. You know, definitely felt challenged, and I would see the good challenge in running X32. But I don't feel people aren't feeling like it's a step up, and people are looking at the shifter field and numbers breed numbers, not feeling it's a step up. And then the last part is the teams that are running, the contingent of 30 to 40 guys are not wanting to race, I think, as much as they originally thought they did. I think the people that were pushing USPKS to do it were like looking at their schedule like, oh yeah, I'd love to run one or two USPKS races, not run the whole schedule, because if they're going to run the whole schedule, they're going to cut out a couple stars races or a couple Pro Tour races. And then, by going to Houston with the last SKUSA race being in Florida and the next stars race being in Charlotte, that's a 2,000-mile round trip. So you've got mid-sized teams that either left their stuff in Florida and don't want to drive all the way to Houston and back to go to Charlotte in 3 weeks. You've got Midwest-based teams that went back home and are looking at Charlotte as 8 hours and Houston is 16. And I think overall for the customers, I think the customers just don't want to race it that much. You're talking about track time a little bit ago. For me, it seems like the shifter guys want to test more than anybody else, and probably race the least. They want to go out and they want to have a showcase race every couple months, and then go back home and do a lot of R&D. So for them to run 16 national races, I just don't think they want to do it, speaking customers wise. And if the customers don't going to do it, then you're not going to see the pros, because what's the point of running a pro guy to flex muscle if you can't at least offset some of his costs by running some customer drivers alongside him that he can coach and develop. So it's an expensive, platform to run. And, if we had, unlike, KA, that's going to pick up of regional people that'll do this as their one national race because it's in town. There's not a lot of shifter guys that want to do that. I mean, there were 8 or 9 or so last weekend, but they probably don't think that they're at the level to race USPKS because it's been built up as this massive brand, when in reality their class is only going to be 10 to 15 guys. So why not go? Because you're not going to get
Yeah,
lapped or
you're gonna have a
demolished.
shot
Yeah.
to at least run top 10, maybe top 5.
Yeah. So I think there's just not enough drivers in the country running shifter to support all those races. There might be 10 guys that run everything, and there needs to be 30 supplemental guys that, then there's out of the 50, let's say out of like 60 to 80 X30 drivers over the course of the races that we'll see between SKUSA, USPKS, and I'm going to count OKN in that category at stars. You've got 6 USPKS events if you count Miami Grands, 6 SKUSA events if you count SuperNats, 4 stars events. So that's 16. It's a lot of racing opportunities. You're going to see about 20 of them run them all, maybe more like 15. Might not even be that high. Might be 10 that run everything. And then you're going to see about 20 to 30 run at least one of the series in full. And then you're going to have about another probably 20 that do 2 races or 1 race. I just don't think there's that many drivers that race shifter. And so you take that same ratio down, and that's what you got. We've got 5 to 8 shifter guys that will run everything. Talon, AJ, Carrara. Even Carrara didn't make everything. Danny can't run everything. PSL can't afford to run everything. They got Canada to take care of. GFC, it's got the West Coast to take care of. They can't go to the East Coast and run 16 times. So yeah, it's either logistically a little bit annoying, so that hurts. For the mid-sized teams, that travel makes a much bigger dent in their budget, and then just for the overall driver base, I just think that people are going to cherry pick. I think you'll see a good turnout if the class is still offered at GoPro and at Cincy and at Newcastle. I don't think you'll get any up at Badger, and if they don't get 10, they're going to cut it here, and I don't blame them. That's an hour a day.
Yeah, it's a bit of scheduling. It was interesting you said that more guys want to practice, you feel like, than race, because I think one of the most interesting comments I saw online was our pal Darren down at Homestead said, yeah, I'll have like 12 shifters on a Wednesday practicing, and then I decided, well, we should offer it as a class in the club races, and nobody showed up. They had to cut it. So
Yeah.
there's your example.
Same thing, right? Like, if you take the 9 shifters from last weekend at TSRS, and then you add probably about 4 to 5 national guys, you got a 15-man class. So you'd be fine. But those 8 to 9 TSRS guys, they're happy just running the 5 TSRS races. And even then, TSRS is they're always back and forth of whether or not to hold it. So I don't think the expenses are really that much higher. But the drivers willing to stomach those expenses to race that many times just don't care to do it. Even Connor, right? Our superstar, said that while he did do the race at NOLA and he enjoyed driving it, that it was one of the more boring racing weekends he's had because you just don't pass. You go out, you do the start, and you make 1 or 2 passes. He's like, I don't, he's like, it's okay, but I enjoy my single speed stuff. So, one of the Q&A questions was actually about it, I think. While we're on this topic, where was it?
We have a few. I'll bring it up. I had the doc right there, but now it's gone.
Oh, I got it. This one's from Chris Hatch. How do we grow and keep growing the top pro category shifter carts? Where do we have to start the growth? Club level, regionally, what engine do we push to help grow the class along with keeping it affordable? Lots to think about. So I think he's right on where do we start the growth of it. People say junior shifter. I would argue against that because while junior shifter did do great stuff 15 years ago in 2010 and through the mid 2000s, and even into the early 2010s, it was still around, I think, up until 2012, 2013 during the Honda days. That was also in an era that people stayed in junior till they were 16. You don't see that. You get in. People are going through junior in 2 years or less. Truly Adams ran TSRS senior this weekend. He's 13. Back in that era, 15 years ago, sometimes you'd stay in mini until you were 13. So from the development curve of what everybody's naturally tracking through these classes on, your first year you move up in any class or at any level, you go to something higher. From mini to junior, junior to senior, regional to national, club to regional, you're going to get your butt kicked. And so if you only have 2 years in junior and your first year is getting your butt kicked, last thing you want to do is go get your butt kicked again in something new. You want to go kick everybody else's butt your second year that you figured it out. I mean, we're not even getting guys to transition from KA over to X30 junior. So there's no shot in my mind you'd ever get a healthy junior shifter class. Now, that said, I don't think that's where you look. I think where you look is club and regional racing, and that's a big reason why Billy Musgrave's trying to push the Yamaha YZ motors that Musgrave and Factory Karts are importing now. They're trying to find some kind of motor that people can run locally and regionally. There's been plenty of talks on Facebook all about it. A guy named Wes Lee over in Phoenix, he's been trying to make a limited shifter. Sonoma actually does have a limited shifter class. It does have a lot of club guys in it, and they're even offering it as a local option at Challenge of the Americas. Now, do those guys go into limited shifter and move out? At Sonoma, it's really a master's class. So I don't think that you see guys leave it. But the concept of not having a shifter motor that beats you up, not that's overly complicated to run, to keep running, overly expensive to run, is what the Honda originally was. And I think that that's on point with what you should have for club and regional racers to learn how to drive a shifter. So maybe the Yamaha stuff's good. The Miami 175 is good now, lasts a while, and I've seen comments from KZ people saying that if you just run the right carburation settings, you can make your KZ last a long time and get a lot of testing out of it and be halfway competitive at club and regional racing. And one guy's comment as well was asking about it. This was from Jason Lapointe, who's a big guy behind I recognize from the GFC brand and the Track Magic, line, the homage that Gary does to Fausto, and the Track Magic era of the 2000s of maybe run previous homologated KZ engines in Masters and regional series. I mean, so there's right ideas out there, and there's definitely a massive lack in local and regional shifter racing, and you can see the difference of the KA class that has a massive local and regional pull being at 50 pre-entries right now, and the X30 class at 16 and the shifter at 3, because there's no regional or local racing really in X30, and there's no regional local racing with a lot of guys that are competitive and looking to go national in shifter. So the motor, something locally and regionally would help. But you're just the national guys, I think, go through the ranks too quick to care. You see kids all the time now going straight from 206 junior to USF4 and F1600 and Spec MX5. That not even KA senior, not much less X30. Sometimes not even going to CKNA Grands, and they're like, screw go-karts, we're just going car racing. So the concept of trying the right way is to go into shifter. Connor did it. Brent did it. If you're actually trying to figure out how to develop your driver to make the best bang for your buck before you go and spend money in cars, you should. Do people think that? Is the perception there? No. And that's what hurts that class nationally too.
Yeah, I think Connor and Brent are pretty proven that. Yeah, karting's definitely
Well, there's another
important.
podcast definitely worthy level episode that I've been weighing around to do, and actually I've been talking with messaging back and forth with Brent's dad, Matt, stepdad Matt, and he's like, I think if there was a poster that tracked the years spent in each category, that all of the current F1 drivers and all the current IndyCar drivers of what they actually did. What was their year-to-year step, at what age, at what level of accomplishment did they move on to the next rung in racing to get to where they're at and to be able to stay where they're at. And it's important, obviously, to study not the drivers that buy a seat in IndyCar and are gone the next year because they run at the back of the grid, and not the guys that buy an F2 seat and are gone because they're at the back of the grid, but the Joseph Newgardens, the Alexander Rossies, the Logan Sargents, Logan's taking heat because he's going up against Alex Albon, but Logan did do pretty damn good in junior single seaters all the way up. If parents saw the real path to actually becoming a successful racing driver and eventually maybe a paid racing driver, because again, you got to remember, half of the top in every racing series in the world, the drivers are paying to race some way or another. But to getting to that point where you do get paid to be a racing driver, understanding what that path really is, and not what the team owner that needs to fill his F4 car or Spec Miata car or USF Juniors car is telling you, it might help that argument to say, yeah, no, these guys went and ran KZ for a year and it changed the kid up. So
I feel like we've already answered one of Jason LaPointe's other questions, where he asks, does staying in karting too long actually hurt your chances of becoming a professional driver, or should you be in a school or a junior series by 14 now? So I feel like we just checked that one off. I feel like no, staying in karting doesn't hurt your chances.
Well, yeah, because there's with what we're doing now, karting does have more exposure than before we existed. EKN, obviously, they're constantly stepping up their game. They're doing way more social content than ever before. So at every U.S. karting event now, at least every major one, pretty much we're at it, or EKN's at it, or both at it. So you're getting a lot of exposure if you run go-karts, and more than a lot of other car series. So it's not a bad thing for your brand or whatever, to stay. And if you look at, in the case of Kirkwood or Askew or, Braden Eves has been on this show, that, they needed to perform like right off the rip in cars because they did not have the budget to spend 3 years learning a race car and how to drive a race car, because it is different. Some stuff translates, some stuff doesn't. There's guys that are good in cars and bad in go-karts, and guys that are good in go-karts and not so great in cars. Normally, it's the first way around that you see. But there is instances where guys are good in a go-kart and they can't ever figure out a car, But in those guys' cases, I mean, they waited till they were 16, 17, 18, and then they jumped, and then they won in their first season because they waited until they were beating the absolute best at their game. On the flip side, you have kids like Nolan Siegel, right? So Nolan just won IndyCar at St. Pete, ran regional racing in California. I think he might have run a handful of nationals, but he was never a household name in karts, and he moved up really, really early. And if you look through his ranks in USF 2000, in F4, USF Pro 2000, did he even run USF Pro, or did he go straight to lights last year and skip Pro?
No, he went to Pro.
Yeah,
he was in pro, but he was in Pro for like 2 or 3 seasons.
Exactly. So he had the budget to be able to learn driving a car by running years and years of formula, and now he's good in the NXT car. But if you don't have the money to go and spend years in cars and get good at a car, you're probably better off, if it's less, to race go-karts and get better at that before you jump, because again, Kirkwood and Askew, they started doing a little bit of car stuff on the side. The other way to do it that's really smart is, and this is where, again, Nolan he's already, by going into the Road to Indy paddock and the USF paddock and not performing, you're doing yourself a disservice if you have to learn there. Like Simon Sykes, who works for us, went off the beaten path, ran F1600, learned there that nobody pays close attention to wins, losses, bad moves, whatever, and then jumped over to the USF 2000 paddock and sets the world on fire in the couple of races that he's done, to the point where he was able to get enough sponsorship to run last year, and what do you know, he wins a championship. So if you want to move to cars early, you have to be really smart, and I think you should go and run stuff that's unknown and learn. But most people, I think, move out of go-karts, and they still could probably learn some stuff in go-karts that would speed up their process to getting up to speed in a race car at the ages now. And how do you get that point across? It's hard. I think some parents honestly want to brag about, want to take a picture on their phone and show the parents that don't know racing what their kid does. And guess what? An F4 car is sexier than a shifter kart. Any kind of race car. Hell, a Spec Miata to a non-racing person is a race car, and a go-kart is a go-kart to them. It's a play toy, and that's a race car. So no matter what you prove of whether it develops the drivers or not, the mass majority are going to gravitate towards that way because of, I think, a little bit of keeping up with the Joneses, being quite frank.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think a shifter kart's cooler than Miata, but that's just me. And I'm probably in a minority there. But, yeah, it's a good point. I guess it's just I think that kids moving up would benefit a lot from senior. Like the kids that get to junior, they're really good, and then we never see them in senior. I feel like they would benefit a lot, their racecraft at least, by staying in senior, even if you're going to make the jump to cars, like running here and there in some of the pro events in senior. Like we've seen with like Frankie Mossman, he still comes back and runs karts here and there, and I think that's helpful. Just because I think the more track time, the better, and whatever you're running. But back to the point, of shifter is like it's back to the same point of like X30 guys not running X30 senior eventually never running shifter either. Like I feel like at some point there comes a point where like I think during the Pro Tour weekend, we were talking about Anthony Martella. He is a USF juniors driver, and after the pre-final, he was gassed, and he runs a lot of shifters, but like running it for that long, he was gassed. So like it's another thing to run shifter to just get your exercise. Like all the car racers, even the top guys in IndyCar will go run a shifter and be absolutely gassed. It's also a physical thing.
Yeah, it's part of it. And, just thinking, sitting now, like, I mean, I'm a hypocrite too. I've never, raced in the shifter class. I've only tested it. And with my life schedule, I mean, I'm still not even to the point where I can go and win a KA regional race, or run consistently through the whole weekend podium. Like I had spurts of speed this past weekend, but I still had some driving errors, and before the end of the year, I'm going to get a couple more practice days in, which I haven't had any practice days in. I had to learn the track. Of all the years I've worked at Speedsportz as a race director, as an announcer, as streaming, I'd never turned a single lap on the racetrack till when we went out for the second session. So I had 4 sessions Friday, and we had a where the wet spot normally ends up at the end of the front straightaway had such massive rain overnight that you weren't even on the correct line going down to turn number 1, and the track was damp for session 2 and for a bit of session 3. So, if I don't think there's enough guys willing to do the testing, right? Going again, there's a reason why these teams want to test so much. It is really, really hard to drive a shifter to the limit to be fast enough to win. So I don't think they want to spend 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, even 10 grand if you're paying everything at full retail with a mechanic and flights and all that to go run a shifter weekend and not be competitive. And you're going to be 3 to 5 tenths off of, Kremers and Formal and AJ and everybody else if you don't drive a lot. So, yeah, like for someone like myself, like I get 2 more practice days and I haven't raced in 4 years. And, this weekend I qualified 5th. So at least my 1 lap pace was good. I just wasn't super consistent, would still make some mistakes, would still make some racecraft issues, had some bad luck. But without a doubt, I think in the final, I could have gotten a lot better. I was actually kind of getting frustrated watching my own onboard video. And, I know that there's more I could get. That's an 100cc. It would have taken me another couple test days to be able to be good in an X30, and it would have taken me a lot of test days and money and time, to get good in shifter. So I'm not in that category that I have the time or the resources or the ability to go do it. And I like to think that I'm at least a good enough like talented driver and understanding what to do that if I put in all that time, I could get to that level. But in talking with like Gary Carlton, he's like, dude, this is kind of what it is. We have 10 guys that are stellar at any given point in time, and you just have some guys that are just never going to get there, and you have a lot of people that just never have the time or the resources or the effort to put even the time and the resources in to get up to speed. So it's a hard sell as a class as a whole. We're doing everything we can. The SKUSA series, the Star series, they're doing everything they can to promote the class. I mean, they're putting it top of the pyramid. It runs last. It gets the biggest prizes, gets the best airtime we can try and give it from here. And it put on a hell of a race there at the end of Orlando. Yeah. But evidently that's not enough to fill the grid. So at least get enough drivers to want to go do it. And again, like Connor said, you're talking, Connor podium, he finished 3rd. And he's won X30 races and KA races and championships and world championships. And he's like, I'm not that interested in going to race it because I want to pass people and I want to battle. And you don't get that. So I think going back to like the 90s, we weren't racing like regularly that fast of single speed engines. So the shifter stuff was a lot faster in comparison. It also, if you talk even with Gary, and I'm bringing him up a lot because I talk with him at length, but there's other guys that could echo it too. The U.S. had no idea what we were doing in the early 2000s and especially the 90s when it came to shifter racing. We are now absolutely at the level of Europeans. You can see it with the Europeans come over. But if you look at like the 2009 WSK YouTube highlights from New Jersey, I think it was 2009. Dude, every European team came in and smoked our butts. Like, unbelievably destroyed us in all classes. And part of it was the rubber getting laid down. We ran a different tire, but and you could say we didn't get the best motors, but they give the best motors to the fast guys. And if we were fast, we would have been able to be up there. But it was the European guys and then us. Our American shifter guys have elevated. It's a hard levels. But back to the 90s and early 2000s in the Pro Moto Tour and all the American shifter racing stuff, it was so much faster than everything else that was running at the time. And it was Andrew, you're right, Tristan DeGrand, but J3 was probably one of the only teams. My mistake, Andrew. You're right. Tristan DeGrand, American 1 and KF3. But J3 was probably one of the only teams that was at the European level in that era. But you go back, and we had a lot slower single-speed classes. Yamaha KT100 was a class everywhere. That's a lot slower than a KA nowadays. So the equal comparison of, like, shifter, dude, it's another level. Like, yes, you bang gears. Yes, it's physically harder. But when you only lap a second to 2 seconds faster than, the X30 guys at a racetrack, you only lap a couple seconds faster than KA. Like, I think people are happy enough going as fast as they're going. But if it was only Yamaha KT100 at 13 horsepower, 12 horsepower, maybe I might be wrong. I think it's more like 18 horsepower Yamaha KT100s or 9 horsepower Briggs, or might even been like a 6 or 7 horsepower like flatheads back in the day in the box stock flathead class for 4 strokes, and then a 40 horsepower KZ. Like that's a much bigger jump than a 30 horsepower X30 to a 45 horsepower KZ. I think that's part of it too.
We ready to get into racecraft? We ready to move on?
Yeah.
So, yeah, you have some clips. You have now you're a racing driver again, so you now have experience behind the wheel, a bit more understanding, because over the happy hour days, over even the Grid Talk podcast recently, like racecraft comes up a lot on this platform, because it's been a dialogue that we've wanted to have, to keep open, to make the sport cleaner, because like you said earlier, we're under, we have the, we're the smallest on the grand scale of exposure, so it is the bad stuff that's going to get highlighted the most, but as a sport, I feel like there's a lot more work we need to do to have our racing get a bit cleaner. So Xander, the floor is yours with your clips and your. I feel like this is gonna be quite the spiel.
Yeah. So obviously it's been a few years, and I'm gonna try really, really hard to not say back in my day or back when I was racing and come off as like standoffish, because even talking to like some people at the racetrack or watching at the fence line with some of the drivers turned now coaches and team owners, I think everyone's kind of disgusted with what we're putting out. I was frustrated. This was the other part that I was frustrated with coming out of the Orlando weekend. I was frustrated with pro drivers that were complaining about lack of laps, when it's like, look, if you want to get paid, you want to be a pro, you need to stop acting as if you're a customer and complaining about the product you're getting, because you're part of the product and you're getting paid to entertain. The other part that I was disgusted with is coming off of the Norberg race with short sessions, nothing on the line, just cash, and we have a wreck fest filled product, and it's like, that's not what I want to show the world of what we do. We make the sessions stupid long, partially for tire wear, to test and show guys skills on that, partially for physicality, to show the drivers physicality, but mainly so that way I was hoping that we would have nothing but clean starts and opening few laps, because guys would, if I take you out, Kyle, on lap 1, if I knock you off the racetrack, middle of the pack where I don't think anyone's going to catch it, and it's an 8-lap heat, I don't think you're touching me again. But if it's a 20-lap main, there's a good chance you get back to me through a natural battling and attrition, and I might get knocked off. So I might think twice about it, and vice versa. I'm not too concerned of someone throwing a dive bomb on me on lap 1 if I know the race is super long. I know that I'm going to run that person back down because they're going to drive their tires off. And, first lap of the X30 race, we're wrecking for the lead. And, I'm like, all right, well, hey, maybe Shifter will be good. And Shifter is good. And then Danny gets frustrated and he drives into Morgado. He said, and I believe I believe him. I think he full committed to try and dive bomb him back. And in breaking down that incident, to me, what it looked like was Danny. He popped it down into first, and then he went to grab the clutch to get a nice launch out of the corner. And the little tap that Mateus touched him, and you can see that the bumpers do come together. He releases it was just enough of a flinch for him to release his fingers off the clutch. If you look in on your angle that you got, you can see his head goes back for a second and he leans back and the clutch lever just opens up and that little whoop, spike of the RPMs and then go into the tires as he was trying to,
That's why I was glad I got that angle, because we can really break it down in the slow-mo, and we can even see the clutch.
Yeah, you can see his hand lose the clutch, and Morgado gets him, whatever, right? But then that looks like a circus finish, and then this weekend going out there and racing, it's been cool. I have to give a big props to Neil Strickland and to Matt Ackley at TSRS. Obviously, they work SKUSA events, they work IKF stuff, they work SKUSA Mexico. They've been around race directing for a long time now, and they've been coming to me for my perspective and thoughts on how it was. I talked with Matt for probably about a good hour or two at Orlando, setting up for Pro Tour the week after NOLA. They told me they were getting some more guys for TSRS. It's tough to find people wanting to do the job that are also qualified to do the job and you see eye to eye with, because it's important. Me and you might not see eye to eye on incidents. You might have a good pedigree to be a race director. I might have a good pedigree, but we don't work together because we don't see things the same way. And so if we both work on the same race weekend, I'm going to call some penalties that you won't and vice versa. The series is going to come off as inconsistent or biased. So that's hard. And it's also hard at smaller and cheaper events to be able to pay for everyone. But they've been very receptive, asking for my thoughts on it, and have made adjustments accordingly, which has been cool. The parents in the paddock and the drivers have been, really respectful with me. Even if I'm going and out of my way to go and talk to a driver that had a run-in with me, or run-in that I saw, and try to coach the kid, and say, hey, look, this wasn't okay. You're fast. Like, you can be there. We don't need to do this. I've had that talk with a couple of kids, and I've preached to all the drivers that we've had on the show that if you have a problem with someone, you guys need to go and sit down and hash it out. And I've been trying to live by that, and not just get mad, go to my tent, stare them down, not say anything, top to bottom. But racing this last weekend gave me a new perspective on some incidents that I wouldn't have thought would have been that big. The adjustments that Neil and Matt made were really, really good, in my opinion, from NOLA to here, because there were a lot more penalties called on crashes. Because the first iteration I told them at this series was that I think that we're having a lot of crashes and people are going back to the pits thinking on both sides that it was the other guy's fault. So even if both drivers DNF, even if whatever, if it's a moot point, throw the penalty on the sheet. And granted, they don't do slips at this series. But at least put someone at fault if it's obvious they're at fault, even if they both DNF, even if the penalty is basically pointless. Because at the regional level, it's a lot of education that doesn't happen at the club races for some other reasons I'll get to, that needs to happen. And they just need to know when they're at fault for something. And even still this weekend, it's a work in progress, but it's definitely going the right way. I told them too that what I would love to have is have almost a steward, like is done at the national races a lot of the time, that basically is explaining to these kids, even like, hey, I'm sorry your go-kart's wrecked and you're at the back of the scale line, but here's your penalty slip. You caused the incident. This is what you did wrong. Because I think a lot of them don't understand when they do stuff wrong. The other part on the race directing that I'm back and forth with them on, and I get their concerns on it, And the public needs to be open to this if we want the racing to get cleaner. And it's some of these smaller instances that don't necessarily cause big wrecks. If those are getting penalties as well, you're going to strike some fear into the drivers. It's going to basically force them to respect each other. Because just like we talked earlier in the show, we're not racing against the same crowd long enough. I can talk to 2 to 3 kids a weekend this year at every race, and if I get cleaned out every weekend and clean them up and they're good for the next weekend, but then if we go into 2025 and if, let's say, I'm racing again, I'm going to have a whole new crop of kids do that same process to, and half the kids that I just helped try to clean up through the year are gone. So, that driver council thing doesn't quite work everywhere. I don't think it works at KA Senior at TSRS. I think the turnover's too big. I don't think it works in a lot of the micro, mini, junior, senior classes. Micro, mini, junior classes for sure nationally. I think senior in the right series, it can, and let them do a little more and have respect if they're racing the same guys year to year. But it's such a difference, and down to the club level, people move up quick, so you can't have that. And so what I mean by these incidents, I'm going to start it off with one that I got wrong on the broadcast. And I didn't say anything because this mechanic came up to me and he said, "You need to stop race directing because you got that wrong." And he was pissed. So I didn't say anything back, but I thought I got it right. I got it wrong. And this one's from Turner Brown.
Oh, blocking low on the inside's Ardiles. Way low. Brown is trapped. He's on the outside. All that hard work to get there. Now Dale and Kart a second. What can the last corner do? They're all in the bumper. Everybody goes wide. Sarah Bradley to third as Brown hits the wall. Diego Ardiles.
Now, I don't have this clip where I armchair quarterbacked it after the words. But Chico, Turner, I owe you an apology. Because in watching this in live time, it just looks like Turner is trying to drive into Victor Day Allen car and he hooks the bumper behind it. But
side, all that hard work to get there. Now Day Allen car.
And look right here. He's not bumper behind the tire at all.
What?
It's this impact right here from Sarah. It just nudges him forward.
They're all,
and that's what hooks him into Victor. He wasn't trying to pass him. He wasn't trying to hit him. He wasn't square on him, but that's a left, right, left chicane, so you're not always going to be square on the guy in front of you.
The bumper. Everybody goes wide. Sarah.
It's a very, very small impact. It didn't knock her bumper in. Even obviously the stewards looking at it didn't deem it a penalty. But without question, he doesn't crash.
All that hard work to get there. Now Day Allen Kart a second. What can the last corner do? They're all in the bumper. Everybody goes.
Because he goes straight into the wall because the bumper's behind it. And this was eye-opening to me because I had the same thing happen in the first heat race by a good buddy of mine, and Joey Friend and his dad. And I want to preface this that with all the kids and all the families at TSRS, I really do enjoy talking with all of them, and I feel a bit like a big brother to a lot of these kids. And Joey's dad has been a stand-up dad to me. He's offered me multiple times, and I'm probably going to take him up on it pretty soon. I was actually looking to take him up on it this weekend. I've been offered to go and drive one of their backup carts and go play around at Kart Moto Crescent, which is about 45 minutes from my apartment, because that's where the next TSRS is going to be. But in the first heat race, I'm fifth in line right here, and we all go low, so the pack's stacking up.
Two
and
laps
Joey
to go when they cross the stripe this time by.
Gets in a bit too hot and kind of knocks me out of the way right there. And both of these incidents don't look massive from a third-party view. So the difference now is I have my own onboard. So I'm going to play that. Let me turn the sound down a little bit. I think got it into slow-mo here in a second. You can hear the bumper smash, and you can see how much, I'm into the corner, and it also looks a little bit worse because my inside tire is up in the air a little bit and just starting to come down from jacking, and then I'm full opposite lock from the impact and the load. And I fully thought, going back to the broadcast, that this would look like a much bigger impact than what it actually looks like, because when you go back and you play the broadcast, this doesn't look like a big hit, right? This looks like just kind of hard racing, and you really, have to nitpick here, and it's hard at the naked eye to make sure that Joey's not getting hit from behind, which he wasn't. And this just luckily happened to be on camera that I could show you both angles of it. But where I'm going with this is that these little incidents, they're just dirty enough, but not too dirty that in my mind, in Turner's case, in my case, I even have, the last lap from Rotax, which also wasn't called a penalty here. This was for the win when I was searching for some stuff today. This was for the win. Now, Macy Williams didn't win on Sunday. For those who've been watching our pages, she got a jump start penalty, which our camera doesn't have a good angle on. So I'm going to trust the race director on the jump start because we were looking head on at it, and Cooper O'Clair was the pole man, ended up still getting the lead by the end of turn number 1. But going into the corner here, you see Cooper, and this is, again, not the best angle. He's braking on the inside, blocking, and she hits him just right there where her hands go like this. Just enough that Cooper goes a little bit wider than what he was originally planning on, and she beats him to the line. And this is another instance, unfortunately, for poor Turner, Turner Brown, where
we go for the final.
He goes low right here. Defends. Okay, he's doing his good job. He's turning. And Jackson Wolney gets in.
Wolney a little bit of
here, let me play that full speed first before I slow it down. And just, hits him square, knocks him out of the way, and it was just enough that he beat Turner to the line. And, fully understand. I mean, poor Turner, dude. 2 races over the last 3 weeks, and he ends up not getting to finish because he did his job. He defended, and I think he should be allowed to defend on the last lap without getting rooted out of the way. I think if Turner's doing this on lap number 1 or lap number 2, consistently like Harley Keeble did at Cincinnati, absolutely move him out of the way. But last lap, last corner, I think you should be allowed to defend your position without having to worry getting hit. Now, a lot of coaches, regardless, and this is my race director response to this. My driver coach, if I'm Turner's driver coach, or if I'm Trevor McAllister under Arcane, I'm like, look, man, you got to brake harder next time. You got to basically brake test the guy, anticipate him hitting you, and then hit the gas. So that way this doesn't happen, because Turner was just braking enough that way if there was no contact and Jackson tried to over-under him, he wasn't going to have the momentum because he would have to wait so long to hit the gas because he's waiting on Turner to open up out of the corner that Turner's going to win. But now you got to tell the kid, you've got to brake even harder, and you basically need to stay on the brakes and wait to get hit and then hit the gas and get out of the turn. And the reason why you want, in my opinion, to penalize drivers from these types of moves, and again, none of these moves that I just showed you, I believe would have knocked the bumper in. So at TSRS, for example, we don't run pushbacks. With the evolution of pushbacks in the very first race in 2017, when I raced it, USPKS was the first series nationally that brought them in, and I don't think I knocked my bumper in. No, I did. I knocked my bumper in actually coming out of turn 8 in a heat race because we ran 2 heats and then a main at that time with a couple less classes at USPKS. So we had 2 heats, and in the first heat race, I was being a little too conservative. I wasn't passing people right back when they'd pass me, but I was just as fast as them, and that's kind of what you got to do in KA racing, and we were racing KA, and I was just too nervous at the time, to be honest with you. But we were 2x2 coming out of the hairpin at GoPro or at Trackhouse, and I'm getting into line and just get a little nudge from behind, as everyone's kind of checking up to go from 2 wide down to single file, and that little nudge knocked my bumper in. Now, if we didn't do anything to the bumpers and didn't learn and try to make them where they don't push in as hard or replace the pushback bumpers like everybody does the moment they go in, so that way the rubber that gets, rubbed off, just that little extra off the lip, is why you buy a new 40 set of pushback pads. If you knock it in once, what everybody does now, you're doing different things to the front bars, trying to run them tight. You're clamping the hell out of it where you're breaking your finger when you put the clamps down on the grid. If we didn't know everything that we know 7 years later about push-out bumpers, they might go in some of these incidents. But I can tell you with confidence right now that they won't, because we're seeing even bump and runs go at nationals, and the bumpers aren't in. I mean, they're hardly ever going in. It's maybe 2 to 3 guys out of a race, and they have to plow someone to knock that thing in. I had it on at NOLA. It never went in off any incidental contact. And I'm not saying I moved anyone out of the way, because I didn't. But I did have it knock in when Jake French landed on me at the start of, I think, the main there. But the pushbacks won't do it. So the race directors have to do it. My recommendation is that, look, it might suck and it would burn some people. And this is where the public needs to become open to this, is if there's a line like this and you're 4th in line, 3rd in line, 5th in line, 7th in line, whatever, but you know, there's pushing and the guy in front of you is the only guy that gets rooted to the outside like this, you get the penalty. You are going to be scared to run on the bumper of the guy in front of you. And I know this works because at SSKC races that I used to race direct, we only really had one big class, and we never ran pushbacks at those races either, and it was X30 Junior. It would be maybe about 20 to 24. We'd go through the first pre-final, and we would demolish 5 karts in turn 1 because there's no pushbacks. Everyone's full throttle into each other's bumpers. So before the main, I would tell the kids that if I didn't see daylight between the bumper in front of you and your bumper, you were getting a pushing penalty of 3 to 5 seconds. I scared them. If 10 of those kids all pushed each other, I would not be able to get all of them. I would miss a few. But nobody would push, and I never had to worry about it because I would scare them. Now, you can't quite do that scare tactic at bigger races like regionals and nationals, I don't think. You have to probably stick to your guns and maybe put a camera on that start. But in this case, off the naked eye test, you can see one kart that goes out of line. You know, it's not going to be 5. It's going to be one guy that unfortunately he gets shoved too much and he gets shoved out of the line. And so if I'm worried that you're in front of me, Kyle, and if you go wide and I'm the first guy on your bumper, I'm going to draw a 2 position or 2 second or 3 second penalty. I'm going to purposely give you space, you know, and you can always run a 360 camera. Look, we just talked about costs and what people are spending. What's a 360 camera to own? $400?
Yeah.
I mean, you know, might even be cheaper, or to put $200 GoPros, one forward, one back, just if you needed to protest it. I think you do that because here's what happens when you don't. When you're allowed to lean on the guy's bumper and there's not going to be any penalty for a bump and run, what you have is incidents like this. And this incident, if you break it down, right, they're already door banging up for second for sure. Like they're tight. Like Chappell in the black suit, he's not all the way down on the outside. He's trying to stay low to Guillot so he can either over under him or crowd him down or whatever. But in Robertson's case, I mean, Guillot's already locking up. He's on Alex's bumper. It's not a big impact for Robertson, but it didn't need to be a big impact to start this wreck. It was just a light touch. And it was probably a bigger impact for Guillot in the driver's seat based on what my onboard showed and what I felt than what this looks like. But we're getting a lot of these wrecks at these races on the incidents. Now, he protested the penalty, and yeah, Reagan's right. He did try to protest, and he lost. And they're calling the penalties on these wrecks. I'm not saying they didn't call a penalty on this wreck. What I'm saying is the wreck happens because you're not calling the penalties on the smaller stuff. And so I'm trying to go back and avoid the fact that we get to this level, because I don't want to put a product out that has us doing this on the last lap of every single race. And in KA, we did this every 3 out of 4 races in Orlando, the pre-finals and the finals. The only race that didn't have a wreck decide the winner was the race that Peyton Phillips drove away and dominated. And so they couldn't wreck on the last lap. And I'll see if I can go grab that here, Kyle. But I know Braden protested this. I think he got it cut down to half, Reagan. I don't think the full one stuck. He still had a penalty, but I believe that they were able to knock it down to half. right? Because their argument, and from his onboard, you can see that Chappell and Guillot are already touching tires. And again, I'm not trying to call Braden out. I'm trying to go to bat actually to get him into a ride later this year, because his dad won the KC Fantasy League. Super nice family, super nice kid, big fan of him. Yeah, but I believe it turned from a 10-second to a 5-second penalty. Anyway, that was a lot, Kyle. So
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me I'm gonna see if I can go and find some of the KA stuff from Orlando. But that's my thoughts. Is the response of like what I would tell a junior driver or younger driver in my shoes is, okay, if that's not a penalty, not only go out and do that to everybody else, but if I get around Joey Friend again in the CRG, I'm going to make sure I root him out of the way. Now, me being me, I'm not going to do that. I can't do that. The last thing I need is for any of these series that are allowing me to race in them with a, already a hand in the cookie jar. I'm already fighting. I have to be, if we're going to call these penalties, I probably should be the last one that a penalty gets called like benefiting. Because the last thing we need is people thinking that they're being favoritism to the guy that owns Kart Chaser and runs the broadcast. And I know that if I race, I need to take more licks than everybody else. But taking me out of the equation, if I'm, if it's just a random driver that I see get rooted out of the way there and he comes up and he's like, dude, this sucks. I'm like, well, old school it. Go out and junk the guy, right? Or go out and do that right back to that specific guy. If you want to race everybody else clean, go out and do that. I don't want to do that to Joey. I like Joey. I like his dad. And Joey, to his credit, I know he didn't do it intentionally. And it's so ingrained in the racecraft, every one of these little things. These aren't looked at as overly bad by the entire paddock. And this is why I was saying I think we need a guy that explains that this isn't the best, because Joey came and wished me luck before the next heat race because he was in a different group. And I went to Joey and I was like, are you going to clean me out, or hit me again in the main? And he's like, what are you talking about? And I was like, dude, like, you blasted me in the corner. We're all breaking low on the inside. We all make the turn and I don't. And he's like, oh, I was getting hit. And then, I'm sorry, Xander. And like I said, there are so many other instances that this happens like throughout the race weekend. I know this happened to me. I knew it was on broadcast. So I want to make sure that I send a lot of love to the Robertsons and to the Friends, because those are great people. And I want to really stress that I'm not trying to call them out, because neither one of their kids, I don't believe, are dirty drivers in any way. But we're getting wrecks like this because there's no issue of being on the bumper. If this wreck doesn't happen, for example, if Guillot does not wreck right here, but let's say Braden does push him and Guillot goes wide and Braden gets into second, I know that there wouldn't be a penalty. And because there's not penalties for these little stuff that aren't big wrecks, we're getting left with 10 to 12 go-karts DNFing a 40-kart main. If you're not gonna, if our limit of what's allowed racecraft wise is so close to the limit of crashing, then, we're gonna crash a lot, because as racers, we're gonna push the limit as far as you'll let us as an official and as the carts will let us, right? And this is where we're going to get to the point where the old heads will chime in and say, this is why we shouldn't have full wraparound bumpers and we shouldn't have the front bumpers. And back in my day, we had an old loop bumper and you couldn't do that, right? And they're right.
Back in my day, you used to go over the rear wheel of somebody.
They're not wrong. That you did have that back in the day before the bumpers are on, but we can't go back to those days because the wrecks did happen and they maybe weren't as frequent because you learned quickly. But when they did happen, they were really bad and guys flipped and they got hurt. And guess what? Even at the drivers meeting at TSRS this week, it was reiterated again that we are down to the final two companies that are still insuring go-kart racing. And if we get any less safe than what we are, which is already pushing the limits, we're going to have no insurance companies to underwrite us, and our sport will not be able to hold events anymore. So we can't go back to those days, because if it's less safe, No insurer will insure us. This is another thing of like, again, the series, part of the reason the series is so hard on us, Kyle, about like what we clip and like the wrecks and the drama and stuff like that, is they're worried that the worst wrecks, that get clipped and shown and go viral are going to land on some insurance CEO's desk. And he's like, why the hell are we even in this business? Let's get the hell out of this. These guys are freaking nuts. They're going to kill each other. We're going to get millions of dollars of lawsuits that we've got, that we've got to take up the brunt for. Because that's how it works. Is if you, the reason you sign the waiver, the reason you pay your pit pass is so that way if your insurance doesn't cover any injury that happens while you're driving in this event, the insurance policy that the series pays for will take up the reins. Well, obviously, the insurance company is a for-profit business. They don't want to have to pay out your medical bills. They want to collect their premium annually from the series or from the NKA, through to the club. So they don't want to have to pay out. But if they have to pay out, and if they're paying out too much, then they're going to get out of the business because it's not profitable anymore, right? It's profitable if I charge you, Kyle, $10,000 a year and I don't have to pay. But if I charge you $10,000 and now I've got to pay out $20,000 of medical bills, I'm losing. This business sucks. I'm out. So that's why, in my opinion, that we need to, do this stuff. And this is a great point as well. Howie Idelson chiming in, that we've talked about forever, right? You put so many go-karts on the racetrack, you just can't manage it. There's too much going on. I don't care how many race officials you put, how many cameras you put. There's just carnage and carnage and carnage. So, running 46 guys, we were supposed to have an LCQ. We didn't. We started all 46. That's a lot. It's a lot of go-karts. It's hard to manage. The same thing just talking with the Norberg thing, right? Justin Dittrich as the lone race director with, flagmen around the racetrack. I think Justin could have, as one guy, probably managed a 20-car main. Managing a 35-car main and seeing every incident in real time without a video system and without onboards, it would have been tough. And if we all want to pay $1,000 in entry fees, then yeah, we can hire more marshals. But the better way is we suck up our pride, and if we're not top 30, we don't go to the feature. But Howie's bang on right about that too. That if we want to call some of this little stuff, I mean, I'm able to see it here. In when I was running up front in the lead pack on the broadcast. But after this incident, I went further back. And got rooted off the racetrack 2 more times. And that was not on the broadcast. And that was out of the lead pack. And so the main, one race director is probably watching lead pack the whole way around. The second guy's maybe watching the second group or floating or supplementing the lead pack. So the more go-karts you have, the more carnage you have, the harder it is to manage. And that's why I give kudos to these guys for calling the penalties that they did call in the main. I need water, man. That was a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I just knew. I mean, you set it up great. You gave good, solutions to the problem and in a couple different perspectives. I just knew that I don't really have a lot to add. I mean, I see it all. I mean, I care, but it's been a while since I've been in the seat to understand. And when I was in the seat, I did a lot of road racing, and we don't have these issues. So I agree with you. And I see the different perspectives, and I will just say from a fan perspective of, watching all of them on the broadcast, the only thing that I really notice is, I like to see consistency. And I think that's probably the biggest key from a fan's perspective. But, yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I just don't have as much to add because I have less experience. I've never race directed, and neither probably should I, but...
But I hope that, especially seeing like onboards like this, right? Like these don't, you look at this and you're like, oh.
Yeah.
Dude.
If I watch that clip on the broadcast, I don't really dwell on it too long, Like I see it and I'm like, Xander got screwed. And then I don't think about it again.
You don't think it's big, right? Like
you don't think twice about it.
It doesn't look massive. But from the seat, like it is. Like it took a lot to get me up off the groove because again, when you watch the onboard here, so right? They're just getting single file. The normal line that you run into this corner, in qualifying, you're like only about maybe 3 feet off that white line. In like a regular race line, not defending, you're kind of straddling the center seam that everyone is below. So we're already like a half car width to like full car width, like to the inside defending. So we're already braking earlier. And the natural accordion effect, right, is Guillot in the white suit. He's got to brake sooner than Aiden, so he doesn't hit Aiden. That means Chappell in third there in the black suit. He's got to brake another feet even earlier than that. French has got to brake earlier than that. I'm braking like I'm already here on the brakes. I'm normally not on the brakes till like even a little bit later. And even then I went slower through the kink too. So we're going like really, really slow through this apex. You know, I mean, I'm getting ready to power back up when I get hit like that. But I mean, again, it was eye-opening for me too, because it had been a few years and I've seen this kind of racing for so long that I'm like, oh, dude, like, you know, it looks like I'm just kind of a little bit out of shape. And then just one little nudge like knocks me out. But they're big impacts. And so if those, you know, Lynn Haddock, and I want to send a big well wishes to Lynn. I know, you know, he knows. I hope he knows how much I shout him out on this show whenever I talk about like legends of the sport. You talk about all-time American greats. There's not much better than the all-American badass Lynn Haddock, and with his toothpick in his mouth and his good old Tennessee accent. Lynn once told me, he's like, Zaner, if we went and I'm gonna stop. If if we went to jail, if we got caught speeding and there were 15 of us on the road, we're not gonna go. We're not gonna speed, because the chance, even 1 out of 15, I don't want to go to jail. You don't want to go to jail. We don't want to go to jail. But if a speeding ticket's only $300, then yeah, we're all going to speed, because what's the odds 1 out of 15, you know, you're the one guy out of 15 that gets pulled over. Oh, that sucks. Pay $300. And while I know that analogy leads us down the suspensions and license system and points and all the stuff we talked about, which we can get to, the same point applies, where like, if I'm so deathly worried of getting a 3 or 5 second penalty for a little move like that where I screw up and drive it in too deep, I'm going to give myself another foot or two. So that's that fear. That's that respect. We don't have that fear. I'm not scared of going up and over the top of Jake French in that incident, because I know he's got a full width bumper if I get in too hot. But, you know, out of respect for Jake, the way I'm trying to drive out there, I'm not trying to make anyone pissed off or make them think that, you know, I'm dirty or whatever, make our brand look bad, make me look bad, you know, whatever, or give anyone the thought that I can root people out of the way and get away with it because I'm the guy that owns Kart Chaser. But if I am just a nobody driver, but I'm afraid of a 5 second penalty for being on the guy's bumper and that guy moves out of the group, I'm going to give space. And I would like to think that some of the other kids around, if they're afraid that their weekend would get burned by losing 10 spots if they just touched someone and moved them out of the way, you know, then they wouldn't do it. And they'd be a lot more scared. And you wouldn't have the incidents like the crash that we showed there, and so on. You know, even like some of the other little stuff here. This is one other clip, right? I was hesitant about posting this in full, but got clearance from Ryan to post it. I wasn't sure what to do with it. This is the full incident from him and Tullio. So before this already, in the pre-final, Tullio had like moved him out of the way off the start and whatever, and had already been kind of racing him pretty hard. But right here, you know, they go into the corner, get out of the corner. Little brake tap there, little brake check, just you know, not the cleanest thing. And I guess maybe Ale did that to make sure that he wouldn't have to defend his position going into the S's and get in the dirty side of the racetrack. I texted Tullio about it. He said he just got a bad exit out of the corner. And I was like, I think you should look at your onboard again. And then, you know, down the straightaway here, this wreck doesn't happen if you call the penalties for moves like this. driving a guy down when he's already alongside. The swerving. Someone commented that earlier on here. Where was that? Someone I think said something about it. Where's the swerving comment? I know someone said something.
Yeah.
Where is it, dude? We got to find this. There it is. I feel like the Euro swerve is prominent this season already. That's the one move I hate, and I saw a lot of it at the Norberg event. This isn't even the full swerve. This is just driving someone down. And this is straight up like frustration because you've lost, right? Like Ale is frustrated at this point that Ryan was able to get a run on him. And then down to the wreck here, there's just no room. You know, at the last second, I know guys would want to like play it minute by minute. Ryan does make the very last move, but you also got to remember Dalton was pushing Ryan down the straightaway here. So either way, right,
Like
if
if
Ale or Ryan are scared of contact for a penalty for, you know, driving like this, you don't get to the ending result of the crash. If this is a penalty and Ale knows this is a penalty, he's not going to do it, and we don't even get to the moment they crash. That's what I'm trying to argue for.
Yeah, like if both of them are too scared, like if they know they'll get a penalty either way, like why would you be running them down and be, you know, even in danger of being that close to one another, you know, if those little hits are worth a contact, worth a penalty in the first place.
Yeah. And Jorge's comment here of, you know, it looks exciting, but just shows the younger guys bad racecraft. And, you know, even like I've heard that comment to us plenty of times that, hey, you know what, it's entertaining, right? Even Ryan's case at Ryan's race, right? I don't think he wanted it to the degree that it was, but you know, he wanted a little bit of that kind of show. We'll get that. Like we'll have, to me, what happened to me is exciting enough, right? What happened in the last turn is plenty exciting as well. Right, even if a penalty kind of, you know, takes us out, right? There's plenty of other clean racing finishes and moments that we can have without us crashing, and we're still gonna have crashes, but it looks exciting, it looks fun. We need to move the limit down. We're still gonna have excitement. There's no question in my mind we're gonna have excitement, but we're not. You know, I don't want to have moments like this clutter our weekend every single weekend that we go. I don't want us to be doing this for the race win everywhere we go. I don't want us to have something like this for the lap 1 of the pro class main event to wipe out one of the fastest guys. You know, that's not a good product. And going back to what we said at the beginning of the show, it's not it's not helping us in our fight for legitimacy if all that we do is wreck each other for the win, you know, or crashes happen more times than not. It doesn't help our case of making it a sport that people want to be a part of, whether they want to drive or they want to watch. You know, we're not trying to be WWE.
Yeah.
And
I mean, it gives me something to post, right? But like, believe it or not, like I don't want to just post crashes. Like you think I'd rather post a banging last lap finish where it's clean and nobody's rooting anybody out of the way. They're just hard racing. Like I'd rather post that. I'd rather that be what goes viral, because that stuff actually does get clicks. It's not just the crashes, but it's just, you know, when the two fast guys end up having a spin on lap 1 of the main event, like, yeah, I gotta post that. Like that's gotta happen. But it's not what I'd like rather see happen, you know? I'd rather be a banging finish. Rather than race to the end.
And I mean, all of these clips, like, I found within a matter of like an hour of searching. Granted, I knew of the ones that involved me and I knew of that heat race wreck, but like I was trying to remember and didn't take long to find the finish of that X30 Junior main, you know, or the K Junior main. I went straight to the Rotax races to try and find a finish, and the first main event I see is a defending little move, knocks him up, wins a race. Like, I don't like that kind of racing. I don't think that's the type of racing we should be training drivers for. I mean, granted, yeah, if you're going to go the NASCAR route, you got to get accustomed to that happening, because we obviously saw at Watkins Glen last year in ARCA, Jesse Love moves Connor out of the way last turn, and that's NASCAR racing. right? Shane Van Gisbergen moved Austin Hill after Austin Hill moved him. And if, even if Shane didn't get back to Austin Hill just moving him out of the way on the restart, using him as a brake pedal in turn one. If Shane Van Gisbergen doesn't get back to Austin Hill wins that race. So if we're sending all of our kids to NASCAR, then I guess that's what we have to do. But I don't think that's what our form of karting is mainly for. That's what the dirt oval karting is mainly for. And dirt oval karting, like, that etiquette is normal, of, hey, run the bottom, and if you get to the guy on the last lap, go ahead and put the bumper to him. We saw that plenty of times at the Maxxis race we did last year. I'm sure we'll see it at the Maxxis ones this year. But our kids dream of F1. Again, Jorge's right here. F1, IndyCar, IMSA, WEC. That's the dreams of all these kids of where they want to go. And if that's where they want to go, then we should train them to race like that. That's why the pushbacks exist, is to simulate a front wing, right? And get them to not do this. And I think now we've had them for too long that it's not doing its job for that. I didn't pull anything from CKNA. I'm sure I could find some similar stuff from Charlotte, because it's got a hairpin last turn of some heat race finishes. Similar way, because guys are defending the last turn in that and probably getting moved. And we see it every weekend now, But I hope that this podcast, with people that are watching or listening, shows that, like, from the driver's seat, those are like big impacts. Like, you're already bracing to get hit. And when I'm bracing to get hit and braking early on the low side to try and not get rooted out of the groove, and I still get rooted, it's a big impact. But it's top to bottom. And that's why, like I said, with Joey, with Braden, with, Sarah Bradley, with, Macy Williams, with all the kids we've shown, and only a handful of clips, I want to make it known that, like, I'm not picking on these kids. It's just those are the easiest clips that I could find. Even the Tullio, I love ADT. I love Ryan. Like, I'm big fans of all of them, because they're superstars, man. They're able to do stuff in a go-kart that I've never been able to do. And not a lot of people will ever be able to do. But that doesn't mean that they don't make decisions that aren't, the greatest all the time. And again, drivers, we play in the sandbox that we're given. If we're allowed to do that to each other, we're going to do that to each other, to win a race. And I'm disappointed to a degree that, like, more guys don't, care what other people think about them. I think that's part of it, of the old heads, adage, right? I mean, I got just obliterated in the main by Drew Chaplin. I love that kid, man. Like, Drew came out and hung out with us at NOLA, hung out with us at the condo Sunday night. Like, super nice kid, super nice parents. And he comes up to me and it wasn't even like a dirty, like takeout or trying to get into me. Like, he just completely blew his braking marker and landed up on my left shoulder and left rear and bent my GoPro mount and cracked my seat in the main, which, I was running 13th. So, I mean, that's not necessarily in the safe zone. But Drew, I find him, and I told his dad I was gonna ban him from the KC house or Airbnb after that, and he's like, go tell him, go mess with him. And I was like, and I go to Drew and I'm like, Drew, and Drew Chapel, like, he's just smiling at me, dude, I'm so sorry, like, my bad. And I can't get mad at him, right? Like, but it's not even like out of malice, any of these kids. It's just what it is right now. So you've got to start that kind of trend with the race directing, and naturally, we can get people into the habit of talking to each other and cleaning stuff up and cleaning the product up. But it's going to start, unfortunately, top down on the officials. And, even talking with Neil and Matt, going back to kind of, finish this point off about, like, the bump and runs and stuff, there have been pressures that SKUSA's felt at the national races that they were being too harsh on these moves. And so they've started allowing a little more of bump and runs. And Bo Barfield's, like, saying it in the drivers' meetings. And I get, like, people, are pushing, but there is a silent majority and a very vocal minority in our sport, and there always will be, because race car drivers like to whine and they like to forget to thank the people that make them fast. So we have, a lot more negativity than we'll have positivity, but that doesn't mean that, there isn't positivity. If it's a quiet paddock, it's a happy paddock. If it's a talking paddock, it's normally a negative paddock. And so if 10 or 20 people were coming to SKUSA and forcing SKUSA to make this change, and that's trickled down, and that's why Neil and Matt are like, hey, we're trying to do this the way the Pro Tour has been being run. I'm more mad at the teams or the drivers or the parents or whoever is going to Pro Tour and begging to let these moves go. Because, yes, I didn't crash when I got moved. And, yes, these other kids, Turner did crash in the one, but he didn't crash in the other one. Yes, we're not crashing all the time that we get moved out of the way, but they are big impacts. And if we are allowed to do that, we will crash 10 times more often, because we're going to do that to each other. And then we'll, end up crashing off. So, and like I said, if I looking ahead down to Crescent or down to the next race, if it wasn't for me trying to lead the way in a good light, and really if it wasn't for the fact that I feel like this podcast and the conversations that we get to have with the race directors and the parents of these series, that we could actually influence some change that way, then I would be. If I'm just a driver, I'd be like, all right, yeah, next race, I'm moving guys out the way, because it doesn't matter. But I'm not going to drive that way. I don't want us to drive that way. I don't want our product we push out to be that. So I'm going to try and use this platform to explain my position on why I don't think we should do that. I'm hopeful and optimistic that, we can get a lot of the other parts of the paddock, the people that are in the comments right now, people that are watching this back, to also join me and, reach out to the series officials and say, look, we know we might get burned for a move that maybe isn't that egregious every once in a while, and get a penalty we may not think we deserve, but we're going to come out of this a lot happier, because we're not going to be putting axles in our go-karts that are getting bent up. We're not going to be spending money to go to the chassis table or putting new tie rods on because we cleaned this up. Now, this is the front half of the field. I have a whole different hour to talk about the back half of the field with some other ideas. I'm not going to go as in-depth into that, but what I will say is I've never been more scared in a practice session than I have at these two race weekends. Good God. I am tweaked in these practices, because, and this is just a matter of club guys getting up to the regional level, there is no spatial awareness for some of these drivers that unfortunately are like way off the pace. And you could be nose to nose inside of them going into the corner, and they will still turn down into you. And the craziest part about it to me is I feel like at that point they've got to be able to see you on the inside. And I'm looking at their go-kart, and their go-kart is a 4-year-old go-kart with a white front bumper. They definitely don't have a big budget. Why are you doing something that could crash and cause you more money out of your pocket? It is mind-blowing to me, because I've always grown up in such a limited racing schedule that I knew if we bent an axle or we bent too many tires, like, I'm not going to the next race. Like $150 axle or $250 axles now, or $250 OTK NASA panel, like, that was a huge dent for me and my family. I still operate with that philosophy. Like, I bent a tie rod. Now it's like, damn, Kyle, I'm sorry. He's like, dude, I'm the importer of the go-kart. This thing is not that bad. Like, it's okay. But man, and again, this goes back on, like, these guys at the back, I don't think they know that they're at fault, that, like, if someone gets to your inside, you've got to let off. Our racecraft in karting is different than car racing. You don't just run the guy tight through the whole corner like it's a long radius oval at a NASCAR or a dirt track. You see some color to the inside of you, you back off, you let them go. And you tuck back in, because you can dive bomb and pass the very next corner at 90% of the tracks we go to. We have like 10 passing zones everywhere. But this idea of like trying to race guys through the corner and turn down on them is causing other wrecks too. And it's not really in the front of the field that this happens. It happens at the back with the new guys, and they end up learning their lesson by crashing. the crappy part to me is, I think, and looking at the turnout numbers of club racing in Texas, and like when you look at the results sheet and the delta between each driver, it's a lot of like 8 to 10 go-kart races. Like, NTK down the road for me in Denton, or the SpeedSportz club races. It's small fields, and it's always qualifying and a heat and a final, or qualifying and a final. So guess what? If you're 2/10 off the guy in front of you in qualifying, and you're 2/10 faster than the guy behind you, that if the start just goes kind of normal and it's a small class start, you're probably not making a single pass, and you're probably not getting past once. And so the first time these kids are even like around traffic is in a 45 car K senior field, or 40 car 206 senior field at the regional, or at CKNA Grands, because CKNA Grands sometimes is the first time anyone's like been around traffic for 206 racers, because not everywhere in the country has a big regional. And you get a lot more entry level people in the less expensive classes like 206. So another like save karting thing is, pill pick heat races that absolutely need to come back more often at club racing levels. Maybe not every race, maybe not even every other race, but Badger does it. Trackhouse has tried it, and people have crashed so much that they have stopped it. But when it's controlled and it's a mid to small club of 6 to 10 go-karts per class, you need to do it. Yes, there we go. John Bonanno, Northeast Karting Challenge. Yeah, they did several pill draws. They are so crucial in developing drivers' spatial awareness, so they can understand when someone's alongside you, getting used to listening and hearing the engine sounds around you of another go-kart, and knowing the difference of when someone's going from, okay, this is loud behind me, all right, now I hear them on my right ear, they're on my right side, or they're coming at my right side. Like, yeah, they're probably gonna be some crashes, but hopefully it's smaller in scale, and it doesn't throw your weekend in a wreck. It's much better on a one-day club race than on a $3,000, $4,000 3-day weekend. But yeah, some of the lesser experienced drivers that have never been around traffic before, man, pill pick heat races, we absolutely need them at the smaller events. If you have a club or small regional and your numbers are somewhere in the ballpark of 4 to 15 drivers, not only is it going to make it a lot more fun for everybody because you're actually getting to race, but you are going to do such a good service for every single traveling series by training the entire field how to drive around traffic without crashing, because that is absolutely needed right now at these TSRS practice sessions, and probably the back of the field during the races too, because I mean, not all those wrecks were happening of guys racing each other too hard and pushing the limit. That's what's happening up front. At the back, it's just straight up like cluelessness, like they just don't know, but yeah, that pill pick heat races, that used to be the norm way back in the day. Again, all right, I don't know what my count is on way back in the day, Kyle, but it's up
probably
there.
like 5.
But pill pick heat races, man, that does do a ton. And I know it sucks, and I know you might get some pushback, because the fast kids that love to practice and test days and weeks on end and weekends on end and qualify pole every time and show up with new tires and a fresh motor and whatever, like, that is, yeah, they might not like it, because they might not get to post on Facebook that they pulled it in qualifying and led every lap of the heat race and led every lap of the final. Guess what? That's boring. You learn nothing. You develop nothing. We were just talking earlier in the show about developing drivers. You're doing your kid a disservice. Going back to like Brent and Connor, I can't tell you the amount of times that Brent purposely starts dead last he does it even now when he goes and runs Trackhouse Club races half the time to go and develop his passing and racecraft. Like, he does it on his own accord, Kevin Harvick did it with Keelan. He talked about it on one of his podcasts that he was interviewed on about a year or two ago, that he was having a debate with Keelan about qualifying being important at these big races. And it was at a club race, and Keelan just drove around, did whatever, qualified like 5th or something, or maybe 2nd or 4th or whatever. And Kevin goes, dude, what the hell are you doing out there in qualifying? Keelan's like, oh, it's just qualifying. It doesn't matter. I'll go win. And Kevin's like, okay, you're going to the back. and told and made Keelan start at the back. But man, yeah, there you go, John. Bring back the 80s. The pill draw would there's the no bodywork comment. I knew that was coming at some point. But the pill draw stuff, man, it would do a ton. And if you're already at a massive club like Trackhouse Motorplex, that's a regional series at this point. That's no different than what we're doing here. We can't do it here at TSRS. But at the club, man, if you've got 15 guys or less in your classes, you can absolutely do it. It won't mess up the day that hard, because if you have like a 30 go-kart class, like, you are going to get carnage in a pill draw, because you don't have a lot of time. You have a lot of carts to pass. But if it's only a couple carts you got to pass, you can take your time. You can wait a lap or two behind a slow guy that's kind of, maybe you're not sure if he's going to see you, so you need to wait to a very safe spot to pass him. But 15 or less, you could do the pill draw. It'll make it more fun. You may have guys stress less about putting on tires and engines and stuff like that, because raw speed won't matter as much. I think you'll have a lot more fun at your club races. I think the families will come away enjoying it a lot. And just, do the standard rookie rule, where the first 3 races someone does, like first ever races they start at the back. And then by the 4th race, they're allowed to be in the middle of the pill draw. And yeah, there you go. Matt Del Sol was raised on that, doing a kid kart and cadet to develop as a driver, still using those lessons to this day. Yeah, we're doing our guys a disservice by not doing that. That's the back half of the field. I made that less than an hour at least, Kyle. That was only 20 minutes, 15 minutes. But the back half of the field absolutely needs to go home and do pill pick races and get used to driving around other drivers. And it would also save the race directors and head flagmen a ton of headaches at the bigger races, because they will have learned at the club level how to start a race from pole and from off pole, and understand the concept of the flagman and the start box and punch off cone, and know a good pace speed. I mean, how many times, Kyle, are we watching a mini or a micro race and that we do 4 pace laps and like
too many,
and the first start gets waved off, and so they know to go slow, so they start going slow at turn 3. And you're like, no, not here. Like, go fast and then slow at the last second, so you don't waste 5 minutes and burn your clutches up. So, yeah. All right. I think that's a good amount of soapbox racecraft stuff. I think that hits a lot of it.
Yeah. Is that it? Are you good?
I'm good.
So are we ready to get into Q&A, or do we need a commercial break?
Let's do Q&A, man. We're going long. We'll do a commercial-free episode for the viewers.
You need some water there, buddy.
I do need some water. Do we have enough commercials to go do it? All right. You know what? Yeah. Run. Well, we only have the AKR ones, and I'm in those. We're gonna know the people with my voice again. Whatever. It's fine. Okay. Let's roll. Q&A. Pull it up. Let's do the stupid questions first.
Stupid questions first. Xander, how do I get my ginger hair to look as good as yours, Hunter Fox? And then also another hair one, Chuck Stanfield was asking, will Xander finally get a low taper fade? I have something to add to this too, because to bring up Xander's hair, right? Like, it doesn't make any sense, because I don't think this guy uses any product. Like, it just looks like that. He just does that. And as somebody who has terrible hair, who like that's my number one frustration, is I can never get my hair to look good. Like, this guy just wakes up in the morning and just, yeah, there it is. And he's got the ginger fly. I don't understand it. So how do you do it?
I mean, sometimes it's a little wavy, so I'll get a blow dryer and a brush and put some heat on it to straighten it.
Yeah, but you're not doing that in the in the Airbnbs before the racetrack though.
Sometimes.
Oh.
Yeah, not all the time. I don't know. I style. You just wait. My hair's wet, and I'll brush it down, and then brush it back. It's a minute or two.
Man.
Yeah, or conditioner. Maybe I'll do a touch of hair gel if one of the pieces is still kind of wavy, so it sits.
See, this is why I'm mad.
Everybody asks about it all the time. You know who they need to ask for hair stuff? Oh no. Yeah, she's right.
Because what makes me mad is how you put no thought into it. Like the answer you just gave, you're like, oh yeah, I don't know. You put zero thought into it. Like you don't have to worry about these things.
Just do it, man. I don't. We get this asked every time. Hopefully, people stop asking now. There's the answer. Clip that.
Well, so we got a few more drivers asking questions. Calvo asked, "How washed up are you?" And then to follow that, to follow up, you getting asked how washed you are. ADT wants to know if you're running SuperNats.
God no. I about died trying to put the broadcast on this year. There is no I about died this weekend. Let me tell you. I'm in pretty good shape. I try to get to the gym a couple days a week when I'm home. But after being up at like 5:30 a.m. working on all the streams we had this weekend, and even then a lot was delegated, but still helping out and then driving and then helping through the day on my phone and then working till like midnight every night. This was a lot. This is a good process for us to have me try to continue to watch, guys like yourself and our entire team like start to do more and more on their own. That allows us to get to more races, for me to do more projects, to kind of work on stuff that interests me in growing karting. But no, we are not ready to have me not be on site at SuperNats yet. And I don't know if we ever will, because I think we're going to continue to grow at that event and some of our other big events that I don't see it ever being possible. So it'd be cool. I've never run the race. I would have loved to be able to run it at some point. As of today, I don't see it in the cards. It'd even be a stretch to do a national. At the most right now, we could do with the split day schedules, I could run a stars race in KA and still announce the pro show. But unfortunately, at the moment, the stars races are not on our TB Kart South Amarillo Kart Complex schedule. We're doing the Rotax Trophy West final 2 races at Grand Junction in Colorado, which I'm super excited. We're doing Amarillo, our home track, and then we're doing the remaining TSRS races, and then he's doing at least his first USPKS and maybe the following USPKS races. But we're not even ready for me to go race at a USPKS and not be involved, much less anything else. And that's not to even talk about whether or not I'm ready for it, which to me, I was close, but I'm still, as Calvo said, washed indeed. I think after the first, I had one test day with Kyle that got me, I think, close to race shape, and then NOLA, and then this. I was hoping to have a practice weekend for this, and the weather and everything else, we just couldn't make it. I'll get to have a few practice days before, but I feel like pretty confident that after this weekend, I'm probably close to where I need to be. But I wasn't there this weekend. I definitely wasn't driving good enough at NOLA either. Was much worse. And beyond that, you have to be so good at giving feedback and everything else. I mean, I was happy that I was able to get up to speed, but we missed some setup stuff that was not on the go-kart, and it wasn't a lot that we had to do on the go-kart, but I have to do my setup a little bit different than Stanfield and anyone else under the tent, just because I'm a little bit taller. Some guys run different setups off driving styles too. I have to run my brake. I run my brakes a little bit different than he does, just because I'm not. If I ran the brakes that he was running, I was like not as consistent, and I know I was like almost spinning out with him. So, but being able to give better feedback to get us more in the range, and that last little tenth or two you need in the go-kart, I'm not there yet for national racing, and I'm getting closer. And driving wise, just less mistakes, a little less rusty racecraft, but we were close. Not bad. Go-kart was really good. Power was good. It was good the first race though too. I mean, these things are actually pretty good. I shouldn't say actually. They have been good from the rip.
Yeah, how do you feel? Do you I guess next time I see Kyle, I gotta ask him how he feels about the felon guys calling your guys' tent the John Deere tent.
Dude, they're fast John Deeres, man. I mean, even Alex admitted if we went a little bit different on gear for the main, he might have been able to win. And I mean, me and him qualified 4th and 5th, and I think Alex would have put it pole, but he got held up on his fast lap like really bad. So, and we were only a 3/4 tenth off of Aiden, half tenth, full tenth, whatever. I mean, we were at a 7.5 and a 7.6, and I think Aiden did a 54.67. So I mean, speed's there, you know. Go karts are good.
Saying, I don't think I've ever seen. Well, I might be wrong, but I've never seen a tent that green, and you know, he killed it. Like, it looks great. And it stands out. It checks all the boxes, but I mean, I just
it pops, dude. And hey, shout out to the Slipstream guys, Dallas Dunlap, Taylor Roddy. This was a home race for them, man. They were fast.
Yeah.
Our teammate Jake Faulkner was quick too. He was good here a year ago. Like, they can call it whatever they want, man. Our tractors are freaking quick, you know. And if I get 1 or 2 more days in, I feel good that we can go up. I mean, Christian Miles already won on it at Tucson, or not Tucson,
Yeah.
Phoenix. So, you know, we're gonna have some Speed Lab Racing Engines power for our road taxis. Obviously, they were wicked fast in Orlando with Frankie and Austin. I know that Alex knows how to drive Amarillo. He's won there. Like, I think we got a pretty darn good piece for a couple weeks. So, to Calvo's question of am I washed? If I can't run in the top 3, top 5 at Amarillo in a few weeks after a couple practice days, man, 100% yes, because I know the go-kart will be good, and I know that we're gonna have really good power with speed. So, yeah. Anyway, next up.
What was the hardest? Well, you might have already answered this, but what was the hardest thing about last weekend?
I mean, specifically on the driving side, yeah, like I think the toughest thing for me is trying to figure out, you know, that last bit of feeling good in the go-kart. You know, for example, in the first heat race, we went backwards, and I didn't really think of this until talking with a couple other buddies Sunday morning. We were just really low on air, and not low by like 5 pounds, low by like a pound, pound and a half, but being a little bit bigger, having more of the weight of the driver upper body, I need a stiffer sidewall. And if I'm running low air, I'm folding that sidewall over on itself and sliding sideways center of the corner. And you can see that if you watch the broadcast closely on the first few laps of both heat 1 and heat 2. Like, my hands are just going like this, center of the corner every time. And I'm not trying to like counter steer, and I'm actually trying to go a little bit slower than everybody else, you know, just because the air was too low. I kind of assume that, but then also I don't have the confidence in myself to say, no, I got to go different than Alex is on air. You know, we're kind of following his lead. And then, you know, we ended up 1 axle stiffer than he was. And, you know, it wasn't until like talking things out with Richie, my mechanic, and Kyle, and going, hey, you know what? Like, I believe that we should do this, even though he's good here, that I think it'll make me better if we do X. And so I think that was the harder part. I'm honestly really bummed because I really enjoy driving Speedsportz, and I would love to be racing there next week, because I think that with what I learned setup wise and just getting to like, I hate that was the last of what I hope to be like a developmental kind of warming back up weekend, because I really enjoyed that racetrack. And granted, we had good 1 lap speed in quali, but that was partially because I timed it really well in the toe and set myself up in a good spot. Yeah, having the confidence to make the right setup calls, knowing what those setup calls are. And, you know, even Richie by the end of the weekend, he's like, I think we figured it out. He's like, we got to kind of treat you like a Masters guy running senior. You're just a bigger guy, you know, in the go-kart. So we need to do stuff a little bit different that's non-traditional to a senior driver. And I wasn't able to do that, you know, stuff at NOLA. We were still just learning what reacted on the TBs in the first weekend. And also my driving wasn't there. And then this weekend my driving was closer. I was still making a few mistakes, and like I was saying earlier in the show, like I'm frustrated, red in the face, like pissed, frustrated watching my onboards from the weekend because I can see the driving errors that I'm still making. So if you're gonna go like hardest part of the weekend, I'd say it's a tie of after the sessions, like watching and trying not like just trying to watch the video start to finish of my onboard and not get pissed off is like tied right up there with having the confidence to know this is what this is doing and feeling that in the go-kart and then coming off and then knowing what change to make. That extra feel I've never been stellar at, just having never raced a lot in a short amount of time. It's always been two to four races a year. But even more so here, this is a challenge because this is a go-kart that nobody else is really driving on besides our team, at these races. So, it's not like everybody knows what to do to these things yet. And luckily we didn't have to do a lot. We went, where we ended on the weekend, we changed the front bar back and forth. What we ended on was a little stiffer front bar. We were, on a harder axle. We didn't change the seat. We ended up doing half caster, and click a positive camber. Oh, and we did mess with ride height. We raked the thing, which is where you drop the front, and we initially left the rear. We tried to drop the rear, for example, for one session, ended up putting the rear back in the center. So karts like this. Some of that stuff, thankfully, we're getting ahead of because Richie Warren is one badass mechanic. That's why he's over at Speed Concepts, and he won't ever be at any other team, I don't think, for a good while because they know he's one hell of a dude. But that was probably the other hard thing that was difficult about the race weekend was knowing the change to make and trusting and trying to give him better feedback to work with. And, he luckily can see stuff on the racetrack from the sidelines being around it so long. He kind of helps.
So I think this is the last thing. Actually, there's two more questions. I'll just ask you both of them in one. So I think this will be the last of the driving stuff. What do you think of the new tire compound? And then someone else wants to know what your favorite track is.
Favorite track? Favorite track that I've driven's probably got to be Pittsburgh. I love that place. Yeah, I think that track is just a blast. The old layout, the new repaved layout, I think Pittsburgh is awesome. The new tire compound, it's definitely different. There is still a good amount of degradation on the old one, but there's probably maybe a little more on this one. I think you saw it at the end of the main. The lead pack was big early, and then it kind of ended up to the four veteran guys up front between Jesus and Peyton and Aiden and Alex. So you have to take care of it a little more. It falls off a little more. It does lay down some rubber. I like that we're getting to compounds that are laying down rubber again. It's obviously faster, but you look at the lap times, and we fell off pretty good. I mean, we were 54.6s. I did a 54.7 in qualifying. In the race, I think I did a 55.6 something, and the Vasquez did a 55.5 as his best lap. So we've got what we want. We've got tire deg, we've got grip, sidewall seems about the same, if not a little stiffer. So you have a little more brake instability.
All right. So Riley wanted to know, do you think Texas has the best regional performance in the country across all classes? My only addition, not about the racing, but like thinking about TSRS, I mentioned this in one of our group chats. I think the TSRS, like the kids and what they do on social media, is probably the best in the country. Like I don't see any other club or regional series where I get the most like content that's not us. Like the Texas kids are on it. And after a weekend where I was at Thermal Club where IndyCar brought out these influencers, I was like, man, I could do the same thing. I just got to bring these Texas kids to another race and just say, yeah, go cook.
Dude, these kids are freaking goobers, man. Like the whole, I'm racing again, and yeah, they are knuckleheads, dude, top to bottom. Yeah, I mean the KA class is stout, but I mean I'd put the Trackhouse Club Series right up there. That's a friggin' stacked KA field too. I think the Route 66K field, I think ours maybe beats it barely. I think the Trackhouse Club fields on a good day, a good 40K Trackhouse Club field is probably around the same to this one. I think we beat Cali Pro Kart, and I'm talking K Senior. I think we beat Cali Pro Kart. I think we're probably in a dead tie or a close heat with Trackhouse Club races. And yeah, probably then 206 wise, probably give the nod to maybe Route 66 or CKNA North. I think the 206 midfield's pretty weak. I think the front pack's pretty good. And I think if it was 206 only, I think you'd have a much stronger field. There's already a lot of the stronger KA guys that double dip. But KA wise, it's probably right up there head to head with Trackhouse Club, and I would say that's a regional, and I'd probably put just a slight nod on it to Route 66. And if you want to look for a meter stick of how close it is to the route races, Michael Levitt was running this weekend. He hovered between 5th to 6th in the split heats, so he ran around 8th to 12th in the main, and he ran Route 66 the last couple of years. Got to meet his dad and him this weekend, talk with them a little bit. He's fast. One of the probably 12 to 13 kids that can put a pole lap in if they get a good toe in quali. So I don't remember his results from route last year, but I think he was up there.
All right, so I am going to cut out some questions here. My point is, if we get to 3 hours, I'm hitting the end button if Xander's mid-sentence or not. So, I mean, I don't think we have that much left, but I am going to skip a few maybe topics we've talked about in the past. But the next one, how will the introduction of electric carts impact growth in karting in the USA?
Man, I don't even know. I know Corbett asked that one. I don't know, dude. All right, short answer. I think if they come in and when they do become affordable, I think it will make our sport explode because we're not going to have to deal with noise or sound pollution anymore. And it's going to be a lot more user-friendly, I think.
Yeah.
If they come out as user-friendly as they should be. I mean, could you imagine the same engine from Kid Kart to Senior? Just change the battery.
Yeah, change the battery, just charge it. Don't have to deal with changing oil or know anything about a carburetor. That'd be pretty.
It's going to be kind of an oxymoron class because we're going to be charging our engine batteries off of our gas-powered generators in the pits. We're probably never going to have electric charging stations at these tracks. But, if the sound and noise pollution is better and lets us race in cities or near cities and not worry about, Trackhouse still has to run a stupid silencer on 206s because of noise pollution that got added in after the track opened. The electric stuff, I don't know what kind of world that looks like for engine builders and tuners and tech. But I can tell you from a usability standpoint, I think we could grow a lot because I think you'll have a lot easier do-it-yourselfer type weekends. So it could be really good.
All right, we got a few questions on growing the sport that I think are really interesting. So we have, why can't kart racing attract any major sponsors for teams to just run professional paid drivers versus a tent full of paying drivers for a few drivers to be sponsored, be driver coaches, etc.? I would like to see real paid racers that don't need to work to race, but race for work. Top level of karting does not yet have true professional drivers till this happens.
I think we're on the path for it. We're a long ways away. I mean, again, part of the format for Pro Tour for Stars was to try and at least have the teams be able to save money on a mechanic. When you look at the money to run a guy, it's pretty high. Whether our broadcasts are free or not, it's, we're getting into that range where we're getting decent corporate sponsors, but, we're going to get them before the teams will. I think also the teams are too busy. I mean, it's kind of a chicken or the egg situation for a lot of these race teams to go and hire a good sales guy that could maybe get to the right company and get a sponsor on the rig. They're going to want $100,000 to $150,000 a year, and only team that can maybe stomach that kind of guy is RPG, and that's on a hope that you would
Yeah.
get it. So
And then it's like, how much are you getting versus how much you're paying the guy to go and get it? What I would want to wonder is, like, every time I think about sponsors in karting, when I'm watching our broadcasts, I think about this a lot. Like, we don't really have a lot of space on our vehicles to put a sponsor that's gonna really get their worth, right? Like, you'd have to fill up the side pod, and most times, like, unless you're really going for it, unless you like really have this like pre-done, like a lot of times in today you'll see just stickers over body kits that have like that don't look right, like, and even if you put a big logo on a side pod, like, it's still not like readable from the broadcast, no matter what high quality we do it from. So I mean, what's the route that you think would be the best way if we were to get
I
sponsors
think,
on carts?
well, so I think we're on the right track in two ways. I think, our views are trending up, still are. That's good. That's going to bring stuff in. And I think the series and the teams are getting tighter and improving their relationships. The series to series relationships are improving. I think it's going to come down to is a lot of trust. It's probably the first big deal for any team that gets brokered is probably going to need to lean on getting banners up at a race weekend, getting a hospitality suite at a race series, um, you know, getting our stuff, etc. Like, ads on the broadcast. And I like to think that our relationship and dialogue with everybody is really trusting and positive, that if they felt that if they brought a sponsor to us, that I wouldn't try to backdoor them and make that a sponsor exclusively for myself. But that's what is going to need to happen for these teams, because they're not probably going to be able to do it on their own. They've got a lot of eyeballs and impressions of those rigs moving down the road. But they'll probably need to go to a series and say, hey, I need, I'm going to bring a sponsor, and need to have faith in the series that they partner up with, that the series doesn't try to take the sponsor for themselves. I know that's a constant fear for me with the partners we bring in, and I work really hard to try and maintain good relationships with our partners. But it's when there's not a lot of food at the table, people are a little more hungry, right? So it'll take time. It'll take a while before that could happen. I think it can. I think a lot of people would think that it can't. But I think we could get there. It's just we'll need to be in lockstep. Us, the series, the teams, and we all need to trust each other, and whether we got to sign something or whatever, and say, hey, look, this is your guy. I'm not taking him. I'll help you. You can give me some money for, out of the deal that you broker with him and whatever. I think that'll be a critical part of an outside sponsor getting involved with a race team and getting it to that point. And the other thing is a matter of, the eyeballs on our races going up and people buying go-karts based on what wins at our races. I mean, again, from Kyle's perspective as, a TB guy selling TB go-karts, I mean, there is a huge value of, myself and the content that we're starting to get ready to really roll with, of not just me being on the brand, but me getting the brand out there and making people want to hopefully buy one. But if nobody's buying go-karts based on what wins at these big races, you're not going to see brands spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to, put a guy in the go-kart. It'll always have to be a mix. It won't just be, I think, a corporate partner. I think it'll be a manufacturer too. But to get corporate partners, we all need to be trusting each other, and because we all got to lean on each other for it. Kart Chaser needs to have on-site activation. The series need digital. The teams need both. we could benefit from the teams having the logo going down the road in a big rig like the Trinity rig, for example.
Yeah. All right, we got 2 or 3 more. So this is a pretty long one. From your perch, Xander, how do we create a national marketing program targeted at the lowest hanging fruit possible? People already attending pro motorsports events such as IndyCar and IMSA and NASCAR. How do we as an industry create and fund a program that would put a booth, display carts, and a karting national message inside the paddocks of those events with a goal of promoting the sport to the masses for the overall growth? He says, we know we'll never reach a point of national leadership in the industry in terms of classes tech licensing, but is there enough common ground to pull us all together in the name of growth? The timing's never been better.
Yeah, I think I can always tell what a Dan Schlosser question is. Love my guy Dan. What a dude. Yeah, I mean, he's right. Timing has not been better. There's no probably higher point for American road racing or American motorsports in the last 20 years, especially with our discipline specifically. I remember talking with Tony from Homestead Karting that he stopped trying to do a booth at NASCAR races because all he got was drunk rednecks, in his opinion, at the Homestead NASCAR race. But I think, just as much going to those races, going to trade shows, like, it's tough because you're trying to judge the ROI and the use on the investment, and again, like what he's talking about is exactly right. The answer is in the question. It needs to be a joint fund from everybody. Maybe even set up as like a nonprofit organization that every series, say $10 or $20 of every entry fee that you pay towards all of these events goes into this nonprofit LLC. That's a karting exposure nonprofit charity that people can donate to, and maybe that's how you set something up and you get the joint fund that way, and you could use leverage like us that has a good relationship with everyone to get it going, and that could buy the vendor booth space and pay to staff it a little bit and then let the shops kind of come in. So I think there's a way to do a group fund like that, but it would need to be, it's so philanthropic because you just don't know, are you going to sell one go-kart off of this event? Are you going to sell 5? Are you going to sell 0? I've been, I did the Atlanta Motorsports Park booth at Petit Le Mans for years. Yep. And, I think once out of the 2 or 3 years I did it, I had, a full kart sale. I definitely had about 6 to 8 karting school sales, like one-day driving experiences. And we had plenty of people say, oh, let me go drive the rental karts at the track. And then you also ran into a lot of go-karters that would talk your ear off, and you're like, hey, I'd love to talk karting with you, but I already got you. That's not why I'm here. I can talk to you at the go-kart track. I need to go talk to someone new. So some people do it. At Portland, I think there was a go-kart booth there too. But yeah, definitely if we had a nationwide organization that kind of worked with these series and got us in, it would also stir up conversations with all of those car series of how to get us to work together. Mazda stepping up in a big way. I mean, with Stars, that would be really cool. And I'm sure Stars might be already thinking along that track of trying to get a go-kart at all the Mazda MX-5 Cup races. I mean, they got big Mazda haulers. We could throw a go-kart in a 10x20 in that thing, and hell, just put it in the Mazda hospitality suite or something. I don't know. But Dan's right. I mean, that something there. Timing hasn't been better. Our relationships with the bigger series are tighter than ever. Having kids like Connor and Brent going up through them helps. So, yeah.
All right. Statistically speaking, nearly every series or event that has run this year has had year-over-year growth. Where is the top line for big events? Can SuperNats or CKNA Grands get to 1,000? Can the National Series get to 400 or 500 for each event? How do we keep growing? Keith Warren.
Yeah, honestly, I thought our bubble would have popped by now. Specifically at like CK&A races. Not that they're bad races. I just, you watch Stars and USPKS the last few years, even SKUSA Winter Series round 1 to round 2. Whenever we get to the point we have LCQs, they don't last usually. By the second or the third round of the championship, we're down to a full grid of 40 because the guys that are missing the main and the LCQ stop showing up because they don't have a chance to fight for the win. I think it is really cool that we're having such healthy numbers across the board. I mean, even with USPKS not getting the same 30 shifters that race, all the nationals, they're still at 220 entries right now, and they're probably going to end up at 250, 260. So how do you get more? I don't know if you do. I think CK&A is in a great spot. They could absolutely start licensing and preventing people from going to CK&A races. And if I'm Greg Jasperson, I'm making them go to my regionals, and I'll get my entry fee money there and fill my regionals up. Like a punch system, like how Rotax used to be. You had to enter 3 club races that were Rotax official club races or regional events before you could enter the nationals. You didn't have to run anywhere good. You just had to go support it. That would be a start. But I think that's more the direction to look because, if I was getting my butt kicked and 2 seconds off after these first 2 TSRSs, I probably would pull the plug myself. So, yeah, I don't know if we'll go above it. I'm impressed that enough people continue to go to CK&A Nationals, and I don't know if it's a turnover thing, that there's so many new people that haven't done it before are going to replace the people that quit. But I would have imagined at some point that people would stop going to CK&A Grands or CK&A Charlotte. Not everybody, but just the guys that like literally run dead last in the LCQ and are so far off that are like, you know what? This is too much. I don't enjoy being in last. Like, I'm going to go home and race my local stuff or get better and then come back. But hasn't happened yet. So, maybe CK&A Grand 600, 700 entries. We also can't fit them. We're at capacity everywhere we go. We don't even know how we're going to get all the parking and all the cars parked for USPKS Speedsportz next weekend. I think Alan said in the meeting that there's going to be shuttles from the hotel on the corner of Speed Street. And that's where overflow is going to be. Then the grass, then the rental area as well. There's a food truck court there. I mean, it's a big paddock, but it's full. Car parking's full. Newcastle was full at 500 entries last year for Grand. So, damn, we don't got more space.
Yeah.
But even if you divided into a split weekend or whatever, I just don't think that our market of racers want to not qualify for a main event. I think you see it every time. Like people were bummed that they couldn't go to CK&A Charlotte, and then CK&A opens it up, and then people were bummed that CK&A was adding more LCQs. So, and not everyone's like that. If you're not good enough, so be it. So I've missed a main, and it sucks, but should light a fire to get better. It's not fun.
All right, last question. What got you into broadcasting, and how did that lead to the creation of Kart Chaser? It's from Daniel Fellows.
See you next episode.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding. I'll give a short answer. We'll have a full behind this. Kyle and I have agreed next week at USPKS we'll do a full deep dive on my background and Kart Chaser's background and all the ideas that led to it in person. But in short, with the broadcast and stuff, man, I don't know, dude. To be honest, I just it started with YouTube stop motion animation videos, but even before that, it was like any other kid,
and those
just
are
like
still,
Kyle.
Those stop motions are still, I think, they're private on the Kart Chaser page now, right? Like, I think I've seen them. in
There's
the studio.
there's a YouTube channel if anyone wants to go and look and listen to 8-year-old Xander commentate called ACXSM, all caps, ACXSM lowercase s. It was a combination channel of myself and 2 other guys. The X was obviously for me, and then SM for stop motions. It was like a YouTube collaborator channel because we thought we were so big with our 100 subscribers. And there's a couple videos on there that I've made that you can go and find. You can listen to me commentating. But I think it just goes back to like any other kid playing with Hot Wheels cars, diecast, pushing them around, commentating the race yourself. I grew up watching NASCAR, IndyCar, F1. More NASCAR sided, so that's what all the stop motions were. Also, that's also what had more video games and diecast back in the day, right? It's not actually that cool of a story. I just went to my first club race and they didn't have an announcer, and I just asked them if I could announce, and they let me, and here we are. So a lot more to that, but that'll be in the next episode because we're hitting 3 hours. And Kyle texted me an hour ago asking to go to the bathroom. Not realized. I looked at my phone after you asked me about that commercial break. I thought that was for me. I didn't realize that was for you. I'm sorry. But hey, our longest podcast ever. So Kyle's pissed. I'm good. I talked a lot. Kyle didn't. I'm gonna hear it from people that I yapped too much. So.
It's okay. Next week we'll both talk. We'll get into it. I'm excited because Xander and I, like, the only difference is my family was like they were karting racers, but like Xander and I, like, I feel like kind of started the same. Like we're kind of on the same wavelength of like how the hell did we get here, right? So like I am excited to really dive in. Like I know the Kart Chaser story. I was. My first year was the second year, and I met them in 2020 when they pretty much the round when they first started. So I know the story. I'm excited to dive into that. That's gonna be fun. But let's go.
Should be good. Thanks as always for watching, guys. Thanks for listening on. If any of you guys are listening to this on a drive to a racetrack or away from someone somewhere, hope you enjoyed it. We'll have more coming on a consistent basis. We'll have our Grid Talk episode coming out soon. Everything will be on podcast platforms. If you're watching on YouTube, we always appreciate it, but it'll be on Spotify and iTunes and Google Play and everything else. And can't wait to get to it. Enjoy. Happy Easter, everybody. If you have time, check into the Whiteland Indy Karting Challenge Club Series this weekend on Saturday. That's all we got streaming, but we at least still got one race. And then next week we have a Atlanta Motorsports Park Club race and, of course, the USPKS opener with 220 and counting. So should be fun. And, we'll see. Thanks for watching.